Most people, from philosophers to friends and neighbors, would agree that being betrayed, especially by a loved one, hurts like little else. Being wronged leaves a lasting scar. Yet, the betrayed are often rushed toward forgiveness. Some advocate for it as the moral path. Others believe letting go will bring peace. Yes, resentment can be a heavy burden to bear. But what if the betrayal you suffered was never acknowledged? What if everyone dismissed it? How do you move on when the world remains blind to your pain? How do you find peace in a reality that denies your suffering? The truth is, you don't. Instead, you escape it until one day that harsh reality catches up to you. Hunter doesn't kiss Jade the way he kisses her. His lips move against hers with a possessive intent Daphne has never experienced, one that stills her heart. When Hunter first kissed Daphne, it had been light and fleeting, barely a brush of skin against skin. She'd liked it well enough, appreciating that he hadn't shoved his tongue in at the first opportunity. In retrospect, she mistook his indifference for respect. He'd kissed her many times since then, some lingering and warm, to the point where closing her eyes and embracing the moment brought an ache she took as a good sign. It would have been a shame to dislike kissing her future mate, though a lack of physical attraction wouldn't have stopped her from accepting their union, a strategic one, as Hunter claimed, for the survival of both their packs, especially Daphne's. She needed Hunter and was hardly in a position to reject him as her mate. Still, she had been relieved to feel herself develop an attraction to the alpha, perhaps even affection. She must hold some affection for him, otherwise she wouldn't be crying now. She thought he cared a little for her too, but had it all been a lie? When he told her he couldn't think of another woman he'd rather build a life with, want children with, had that been a lie? When he smiled at her, that private smile, hinting at a budding connection as they shared stories, hopes, and dreams, had that been fake? It hadn't been for her. She'd kept his smiles close to her heart like a fool. They made her feel warm, less alone. His lingering looks made her feel seen, protected, perhaps even understood. Now she felt foolish, just a day away from their mating ceremony, for slowly giving him her trust and a portion of her heart. Earlier that night, Hunter had wished her good night, lingering by her door, pressing against her as if the thought of leaving was too much to bear. All lies. Tomorrow, he'd said, his voice low and intimate against her skin, I'll make you mine. He'd sounded like he meant it. When sleep had eluded her, the hours stretching endlessly into the night, Daphne had thought perhaps she and Hunter could take their relationship further. Restless with nerves at the prospect of being mated and claimed in front of both their packs in a few hours, she went in search of him. She expected to find Hunter asleep, hoping to wake him with soft, lingering kisses, or perhaps he'd be awake, waiting for her, fully aware she'd come to join him. He was a confident man, well acquainted with his stunning good looks and charm. But when she found him, he hadn't been waiting. Instead, he was moaning Jade's name, gripping her tightly. He hadn't even noticed Daphne enter his home, so lost were they in each other. This wasn't the first time Daphne had caught them together. The first incident had occurred mere weeks after Hunter began courting her. Back then, she'd been wary of him, cautious of his good looks, domineering strength, and the sheer power he exerted over other shifters, including her own people. Yet her pack needed stability. Her beloved older sister and alpha, Diana, had mysteriously fallen ill, trapped between life and death in a coma that baffled everyone. Without its alpha, the pack grew perilously vulnerable. Though Daphne, as Beta, tried to step up, she lacked the authority and dominance Diana had always displayed. When Hunter, leader of a neighboring pack, proposed a union to unite their two groups, she felt compelled to consider it. Diana had always preferred their pack remain independent, uninterested in expansion or entanglements, wanting instead to preserve their way of life. But with Diana possibly never waking up, and despite the stubborn hope clinging to Daphne's heart, she knew she had to ensure her pack's survival. They were small and vulnerable now, deprived of Diana's raw power. Hunter had been kind and patient, offering his pack's protection freely. He claimed it was the least he could do for the woman he wanted as a mate. He would settle for no other. "I only ask that you get to know me," he'd said. "I only ask for a bit of your time so I can show you what we could be." Her people already trusted him, grateful for his help, seeing the union as a blessing. How could Daphne refuse to let him try? And so they began courting, but weeks later, she caught Hunter with Jade for the first time. Jade was a member of his pack, a type of beauty that came along only every few generations, stunning, strong, and charming, everything Daphne wasn't. Yet, Daphne didn't feel envy. She was used to following in her sister's footsteps and had never minded it. Preferring quiet and solitude, she quickly understood that her ideal lifestyle wouldn't align with the expectations placed upon her now. To make a pack thrive, packs needed not independence but obedience and a strong sense of hierarchy. Critical thinking didn't elevate one as a powerful shifter. Without her older sister there to shield her interests and grant her freedom, Daphne now had no choice but to comply with the expectations of the pack. Perhaps if Diana had been present the first time Daphne caught Hunter holding Jade, with his nose buried in her neck, things might have unfolded differently. But as it stood, Daphne was left to accept Hunter's lies as truth, turning a blind eye for the sake of a union everyone around her celebrated. "Jade is a good friend who's going through a rough time," Hunter had claimed when Daphne confronted him later. He admitted to having had a liaison with Jade in the past, but swore it was over, despite the undeniable connection that remained between them. "I trust Jade with my life, and so does the pack. She's very important, to us, to me." It had clearly mattered to Hunter that Daphne and Jade grow close, so Daphne made an effort. Jade, after all, had been nothing but open and kind. Yet there was something, a gleam in her eyes, a reverence when she spoke of Hunter that always unsettled Daphne. The second time she caught them together wasn't just an embrace. Daphne's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a relentless drum echoing through the hollow pit of her stomach. Her intended was locking lips with Jade, the girl firmly planted on Hunter's lap. Daphne's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as Hunter chased after her, drunk and swearing this would never happen again. He kissed her then, his breath heavy with liquor, and though Daphne didn't enjoy it, she found solace in how well things were going for the pack since their courtship began. And so she turned a blind eye. But there was a third time, and a fourth, and now, mere hours before the mating ceremony, it happened once more, too many times to count. When Hunter's eyes met hers, glazed with raw pleasure, he made no move to stop himself. He didn't even pause in touching Jade, mere hours before their mating, right in front of Daphne. He no longer cared if she watched. The hard truth struck Daphne like a slap. She'd been a fool. She understood now. Perhaps Hunter was good for their pack, but he wasn't good for Daphne. Tomorrow, she would be mated to a man who loved another, a man who had stopped hiding his true feelings from his future mate, a man who Daphne knew would never renounce Jade, a man who had won both Daphne and her pack without surrendering his lover and mistress, a man she could no longer stop. Her pack needed him, and he knew it. With her mother gone and Diana absent, Daphne still had some allies within the pack. In the quiet hours of the morning, mere hours before the ceremony, she sought out Laura. Shame weighed heavily on her as she confessed Hunter's betrayal, feeling as though she herself had done something wrong. One who'd strayed, you're a fool if you think he's ever going to stop sleeping around. Laura had replied, not without empathy, but with a hardness in her eyes that surprised Daphne. He's an alpha, Daphne, and have you seen the way he looks? Women will always long for the privilege that comes with his attentions, and no one has ever told him there was anything wrong with enjoying that. Daphne had nodded, cheeks flushing red. So I should leave him then, she concluded hesitantly. But Laura had laughed, her eyes turning pitying. Oh no, honey, I didn't say that. Why would you deny him? He's powerful. He'll be good for the pack. And besides, she added, a warning edge to her words, you can't refuse an alpha. They refuse you, not the other way around. When Daphne had opened her mouth to protest, for that hardly seemed right or fair, her friend, her good childhood friend, had added, besides, you'll see, he is very good in bed. Daphne's reflection distorted in the glass window seems foreign. A woman clad in an extravagant white gown, betrayed and forsaken, her dreams shattered. Intimately behind her, Jade combs her hair into an intricate braid, sighing intermittently. She carries Hunter's scent discreetly imprinted on her skin, though Hunter tries not to flaunt his claim over Jade too blatantly before his own mating ceremony. Daphne can distinctly smell their mingled scents on the girl's skin. Do you mind if I take a seat? Jade asks after a moment, not waiting for Daphne's response before collapsing into a nearby chair. From there, she begins to scrutinize the bride. You clean up well, she comments after a pause, her smile serene, her cheeks touched with a light pinkish glow. Could you fetch me some fresh water? Jade suddenly asks. A watercraft sits within her reach, yet she remains seated, batting her eyelashes innocently. I've been tending to your hair for the past 20 minutes, Jade insists with a smile. Daphne wonders how one of the strongest wolves in Hunter's elite pack could feel tired after less than half an hour. She doesn't voice her thoughts, but Jade seems to read the skepticism on her face. In my current state, Jade says, placing a hand on her abdomen, I need plenty of rest. Daphne's heart races at the implication, but she maintains a facade of indifference, hoping it shields her from further humiliation. Pregnancy really takes it out of you, Jade adds, her gaze eager. Jade, Daphne interrupts tiredly, must we really do this? By this, she refers to the passive-aggressive dance of two rivals forced to feign friendliness. Daphne isn't one for pretense. I thought you'd be happy for me, Jade says sharply, her tone edged with a warning. You didn't even offer your congratulations. Despite not owing Jade anything, guilt creeps in, which only worsens the situation. Should Daphne have offered her congratulations despite her distaste for dishonesty and pettiness? I suppose Hunter's the father, Daphne asks. Jade's posture becomes defensive, her usually sweet and flowery scent turning sour. We didn't mean for it to happen, she says. Daphne furrows her brow. Are you saying you didn't want it? The question is genuine, which makes Jade's slap all the more shocking. Daphne barely reacts in time to stop the second attempt, twisting Jade's wrist to prevent another strike. How dare you imply that it isn't an honor to serve my alpha? Jade screeches, her face contorted with fury. Of course I was willing, Daphne wants to argue, that no one should feel obligated to be intimate with anyone, alpha or not, but she's too busy restraining Jade. Jade yelps, her eyes flashing gold with fury. Hunter enters just then, his alpha presence heavy in the room. What is the meaning of this? He demands, eyeing them both coldly. Jade immediately softens her demeanor, shifting to one of pity, which influences Hunter's reaction. Alpha, she whimpers, clinging to him. She attacked me. Daphne remains calm despite Hunter's stern look. "Congratulations on the pregnancy," she tells him nonchalantly. "You must be excited." Hunter's gaze flickers back to Jade, who reluctantly steps back. "I thought she already knew," Jade says plaintively. "Surely the news of you getting an heir," Hunter commands, his voice authoritative. Jade exits reluctantly after a subdued bow. Once alone, Hunter sits beside Daphne, brushing her cheek with a kiss. "You look beautiful," he says, his eyes appraising. "I couldn't be more pleased about taking a mate." Daphne doesn't respond, lost for words. The silence stretches until Hunter breaks it with a sigh. "Look, don't worry about the pregnancy," he says. "It won't change anything. Jade's child will obviously not be my heir." "You said things were over between you two," Daphne retorts quietly. "And they were, for a time. But you can't expect me to remain entirely celibate before we start sleeping together," Hunter explains. "And you can't expect me to believe this affair will end once we do," Daphne counters. She wishes she could feel detached and businesslike about this conversation, but her cheeks burn and her heart constricts painfully. It's hard to tell if it's sorrow or shame driving her emotions. "I'm an alpha, Daphne," Hunter replies. "I have certain needs. Jade understands that, and so will you. Trust me," he smirks. "After a while, you'll be begging me to visit someone else's bed just for a moment of peace." Daphne pauses, considering his words. "Fine," she says, despite her feelings. "So, you're suggesting an open relationship? You want me to allow you your mistresses?" "Allow?" Hunter scoffs, as if the word is a joke. Seeing Daphne's serious demeanor, he composes himself. "Yes," he says more solemnly. "I will have mistresses, but only our children will inherit the pack." "If you're allowed mistresses," Daphne turns to face him squarely, "then I will have lovers." Hunter's eyes narrow, his scent souring further. "You're about to be the alpha's mate. You won't need any lovers," he growls, his tone dangerous. "It's not necessarily about need," Daphne replies calmly, smiling. "Sometimes it's about want." There's a brief pause, then Hunter slams his fist on the table, rising to his feet. His command echoes with authority, silencing Daphne instantly. Hunter's satisfaction is evident as he observes her compliance. "Good," he says, his tone firm. Reluctantly, she moves forward, acutely aware of the weight of their gazes. Her friends, her family. There's Grandma scattering petals on the left, and her father on the right, gripping her arm tightly. The old and the young, warriors and healers from her pack, all gathered here, save for one. Diana's absence makes this moment feel incomplete, wrong even. Taking Hunter's hand in hers feels unnatural, but Daphne tells herself it's for the good of the pack. She swears fidelity, grinding her teeth as Hunter repeats the vow back to her. He looks every bit the ideal alpha today. Golden skin, dimpled smile, broad and strong. His beauty stings, his golden curls catching the sunlight, framing his face perfectly. His warm brown eyes meet hers, though she wonders if he's imagining someone else standing there. He towers over her, imposing yet striking, the perfect leader for their people. She tries to convince herself of this as tradition demands he lean in to deliver the mating bite. But when his teeth grazes her neck, she startles, pulling away abruptly. Gasps ripple through the crowd. "What are you doing?" Hunter mutters under his breath, his grip tightening painfully on her forearm. Is it intentional? Does it matter? Her mind spins, dizzy and disoriented, while her heart aches with fear. Afraid. She's afraid. Is that what's best for her pack? "I need a moment," she whispers, already retreating toward the reception house. Inside, Daphne paces before the mirror, her voice barely audible. The delicate fabric of her gown drags behind her like a haunting shadow. Outside, the festivities continue, laughter and music drifting through open windows, but they only deepen her unease. Guests laugh and mingle, oblivious to the turmoil within her. This isn't just about Jade's revelation or personal humiliation. Something deeper feels profoundly wrong. Something she can't yet name claws at her chest, whispering that she shouldn't be here, shouldn't be doing this. Jade's pregnancy hit like a tidal wave, a cruel confirmation that Hunter's affections had never truly belonged to Daphne. Yet it wasn't merely the betrayal that unsettled her. It was the creeping sensation of something darker, more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Her hand pressed against her racing heart as she tried to steady herself, attempting to silence the growing unease. It's just the hurt, she reasoned internally, trying to mask the deeper fears clawing at her. Just the sting of being deceived by someone I thought I could love. "You're overreacting," but her intuition refused to be ignored, stubbornly ringing like a warning bell in her mind, its intensity mounting with every passing second. Hunter was the alpha her pack needed, a union that promised stability and strength. Her duty seemed clear, or so she'd been led to believe. Yet now, standing alone in her opulent bridal chamber, Daphne questioned everything. The needs of the pack suddenly felt distant, overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of impending danger. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was Hunter himself. His behavior, his timing, all of it seemed too convenient, too perfectly orchestrated. Her gaze drifted around the room, landing on the extravagant gown that now felt less like a symbol of joy and more like an iron cage. When she and Diana were children, their grandmother had always told them to trust their instincts. As shifters, she'd said, your animal senses often perceive what your human minds cannot. Diana had always been wary of Hunter, for reasons Daphne hadn't fully understood at the time. It was Diana, the alpha, whom he had initially sought to court. He'd arrived during a celebration, radiant and confident, asking Diana to dance, his eyes fixed on her the entire night. Daphne had felt a pang of jealousy, a feeling she could now admit stemmed not only from Diana being the alpha, the leader, the strongest shifter in the pack, but also from the way she commanded the attention of another alpha, a formidable alliance within reach. But Diana had rejected him, and soon after she had fallen ill. Suddenly, Daphne had everything, the attention, the respect, the man. But she had lost Diana. They say you don't know what you have until it's gone. Outside her room, Hunter's voice echoed angrily. He was waiting. They all were. Daphne felt suffocated, desperation clawing at her chest. She had to make a decision. The weight of abandoning her pack's future bore down on her. With trembling hands, she reached for her veil, her resolve wavering as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that seemed to creep closer. "You're being petty," she scolded herself. Diana would have done what was right, what was needed. But Diana had never liked Hunter. Daphne pushed the thought aside, opening her door. Hunter's voice boomed across the hall, Jade's plaintive tone adding to the chaos. Something within Daphne compelled her to follow it, despite her apprehension. She climbed the stairs to the next floor. "Why did you have to tell her about the baby?" Hunter growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I told you," Jade replied. "I thought she knew." "Liar. You couldn't wait until after I made it official with her. If you hadn't let your petty jealousy take over." "I'm not jealous," Jade snapped. "I know what's at stake." "Stake here, do you hear that?" Hunter barks. "We need this pack, Jade, the power they have." "You know I disagree. They're weak. We could have easily taken them by force, but you had to go and try to get with the sister." "So this is about Diana then?" Hunter sneers. "You were obsessed with Diana. Is that why you poisoned her?" Daphne's heart stops. Poisoned? That can't be possible. She thought Diana was merely ill, and yet no one understood what had put her sister into a deep sleep. "You want her pack. I want you. Best of both worlds," Jade replies. Daphne abruptly spins on her heels, not caring about the noise she is making. The fact that the conversation she has just overheard falls silent doesn't register as she bursts back into her room. Almost out of her control, she begins to shift. Her body shrinks, her wings spread, and her dress falls to the floor as she throws herself out of the window, taking to the skies. 7 hunters may not be able to fly, limited to their wolf forms, but Daphne isn't the only one among her own who can transform into a bird. She has no doubt that someone might try to come after her, if not to forcibly retrieve her, then at least to persuade her to return. The thought sends a wave of fear through her. The notion of captivity is unbearable in this form, which epitomizes freedom like no other. How could one not feel liberated while roaming the skies? Daphne knows she cannot afford to waste any time. With a sudden rush of wind beneath her wings, Daphne surges higher. The freedom of flight is intoxicating, liberating her from earthly concerns and the constraints of her previous life. As she ascends, the world below diminishes. The vibrant colors of the forest merge into a patchwork quilt of green and gold. The treetops shimmer like a sea of emerald, undulating rhythmically with the wind. Each flap of her wings elevates her further, distancing her from the ties of pack territory and the oppressive weight of her past life. The sensation of flight is sheer enchantment. The crisp, cool air flows effortlessly around her, its currents caressing her gently. No longer does Daphne feel the oppressive weight of her fears or the gnawing guilt that has plagued her moments before. As she climbs higher, the murmurs of her past life fade into faint echoes, gradually dissolving into the serene quiet of the upper atmosphere. She feels a profound sense of rightness, as though she is rediscovering a part of herself that has lain dormant under layers of duty and despair. In this magical space, the pack, the impending marriage, all seem like distant memories, as ephemeral as wisps of cloud drifting beneath her. The higher and farther she flies, the more she embraces the profound truth of her own freedom. And then an arrow pierces her wing. The shaft strikes with precision, embedding itself deep into her wing and sending shards of agony through her entire body. Her instinct is to cry out, but in her bird form, she can only emit a shrill, panicked cry as she struggles to maintain control. Desperation surges through her as she fights to stay aloft. Aloft, despite the overwhelming pain, she knows she needs to land quickly to shift back and remove the arrow. Her flight becomes erratic as she struggles to maneuver, aiming for the thick canopy of trees below. Just as she begins her descent, another arrow whizzes past her, grazing her feathers and intensifying her anguish. Daphne's heart pounds with terror. It is clear this is no random accident. She is being hunted, and the danger is closing in. With fierce determination, she maneuvers into the glaring sun, hoping to confuse her pursuers with the blinding light. The sunlight's intensity is nearly unbearable, but it offers a brief respite from the next volley of arrows. Squinting through the pain, she keeps her focus on the approaching treetops, each moment stretching agonizingly as she fights to descend. The trees, lush and tantalizingly close, seem to stretch endlessly as she draws nearer. Another arrow soars through the air, narrowly missing her. The terror of being so exposed and vulnerable is overwhelming. Her injured wing aches, barely keeping her aloft. In a heart-stopping moment of panic, she loses her bearings. Her weakened wing falters, and she collides with a branch. The impact sends her spinning, and she tumbles down through the branches, crashing heavily onto the forest floor below. The jarring hit, nearly as painful as the arrow, leaves her disoriented and racked with pain. Desperately, she tries to move, but her body feels heavy and unresponsive. The forest floor seems to tilt and spin as dizziness engulfs her. The sound of approaching footsteps reaches her ears. Whoever has been after her, whoever has inflicted such pain, is now coming for her, their steps growing louder and more menacing. Panic surges anew. Instinctively, her body begins to shift, her wings morphing back into her human form. The transformation is rough and painful, but necessary to tend to her injuries. As her human form emerges from the disheveled feathers, she fumbles with the arrow embedded in her arm. Her hands tremble as she struggles to remove it. Can she heal quickly enough to confront whoever is coming for her? Who could it be? One of Hunter's people? The pain is unbearable, each movement sending waves of agony through her weakened body. Blood flows freely, and her vision blurs with the strain. Her hands, slick with blood, finally manage to pull the arrow free, but the effort leaves her feeling faint and disoriented. The footsteps are closer now, and a male voice breaks through the haze of her fading consciousness. The words are muffled and indistinct, but the urgency in the tone is unmistakable. Daphne's consciousness returns slowly, almost reluctantly, through the warm, pleasant haze of sleep. Her eyes remain closed, but she can tell she is lying on the softest, most comfortable bed she has ever experienced. She feels refreshed in a way she hasn't in years. The mattress is so soft, it feels like swimming in cotton, and Daphne is in no hurry to get up. That is, until she stretches her arm and feels a dull, lingering pain. The moment makes itself known, shattering the illusion of comfort. She finally opens her eyes to the golden light of dusk filtering through the windows, casting an ethereal glow across the breathtakingly beautiful bedroom. The grandiose space is adorned with vivid blooms, so vibrant that all of Daphne's questions, such as where she could be and who brought her here, vanish. All she can do is gape. She would have stayed there much longer if not for the pressing hunger twisting her stomach. Her feet find satin slippers as she eventually steps out of bed. The marble tiles beneath them are cool, yet comfortably smooth. To her left, a broad selection of books lines a wall, their spines gleaming invitingly. But it's the lovely little pond to her right, with its small, graceful waterfall, that truly catches her eye. The gentle sound of water cascading down the rocks is soothing, and the pond mirrors her memories of a cherished park she used to visit with Diana when they were young. Could this be a dream? How did she end up in such a lovely place? The last thing Daphne remembers is being shot at. She had been scared and hurt. Perhaps she has died and traveled to the world beyond. The thought might have made her sad if the room hadn't been so tailored to her needs. As it is, Daphne is filled with gratitude, feeling as if she has been given a precious gift, one that makes her forget her worries, regrets, fears, and doubts. Slowly, she moves to look out one of the bedroom windows and finds a vast, sublime castle stretching before her. too grand and magnificent for the human eye to fully grasp. An architectural marvel of spires and turrets reaches toward the sky, their tips shimmering with otherworldly light. Gardens filled with vibrant flora bloom just beyond the window frame and into the horizon. The air is filled with a gentle, harmonious hum, as if the castle itself is alive and breathing, imbued with a sense of peace and tranquility that feels both inviting and unsettling. How has Daphne never heard of such a place? Surely she would know if a castle of heavenly beauty awaited near her pack's territory. Could it be that she has been taken far from her home to a place so distant she had never known it existed? Turning back toward her bed, she finds it pristinely made, adorned with a beautiful shimmering gown of silver that seems to be waiting for her. Daphne frowns. Something nags at the back of her mind. The animal side of her is somewhat uneasy. Perhaps driven by it, she suddenly thinks of walking toward the flower-covered wall of her room, reaching out to a visually perfect rose. Its scent is dull, almost non-existent, leaving a sense of disappointing confusion within her. The flower is so beautiful, yet without a scent, it feels almost artificial. The gown on the bed disappears, replaced by a t-shirt and jeans. Somewhat relieved, Daphne dresses and exits her bedroom. 9 hunter paces around the living room of the pack house like a beast trapped in a cage. He hadn't expected Daphne to get away. He should have. She was Diana's sister, after all. Diana, unlike any woman he'd ever met, had denied him at first. Hunter had approached her because she'd been the alpha of an intriguing pack, one with the power to shift not just into wolves but many different animals. Diana was a powerful alpha and an even more formidable shifter. Rumors of her great beauty had not been exaggerated, though she may not have been as classically stunning as Jade, whose allure captivated everyone, including Hunter himself. Jade was the only mistress he hadn't grown tired of, relishing the envy in other men's eyes whenever she was near. Diana couldn't compare in that regard, but there had been something else about her, a quiet strength, resolve, and determination to deny him what he wanted. That refusal enticed the beast within him. She didn't want him or his help. She believed she didn't need it, which only fueled his desire to possess her. It became a pressing, all-consuming need. He courted her as he thought she'd want, playing the role of trusted ally, patient friend, someone who valued her opinion and considered her an equal. All the while, he waited for the day she would kneel before him, begging for him, as they all eventually did. Jade had been betrothed when he met her, supposedly in love, yet now she belonged to him. Diana would too, along with her pack, or so he thought. To his surprise, Diana never yielded. In fact, she claimed she would remain celibate for life, uninterested in romantic relationships altogether. This declaration made Hunter laugh at first, assuming it was a ploy, but soon realized she meant it. By then, he decided fear might serve as a better motivator. If threats wouldn't sway her, perhaps illness would soften her resolve. But by the time he discovered Jade's hand in Diana's ailment, Hunter had already shifted focus to Diana's younger sister, Daphne. Daphne wasn't nearly as fascinating as Diana, nor particularly beautiful, but mating with her offered access to Diana's pack, the next best thing. Her scent bore resemblance to Diana's, and occasionally a spark of quiet determination lit up her eyes, making her briefly resemble her older sister. She was practical, modest, intelligent, and most importantly, Hunter doubted she'd demand much from him. Yet now Daphne was gone. Even if Diana were to awaken, she'd never made with her late sister's former lover. And Daphne? She left him scorning his advances, leaving behind nothing but the thrill of pursuit. The idea consumed him since her departure. Now she was a prize worth chasing, a challenge igniting his predatory instincts. The thought of her running, evading him, sent a rush through his veins. Victory tasted sweet in his mind, and anticipation sang in his blood. The satisfaction of seeing the fear in her eyes when he finally caught up to her filled him with a twisted sort of pleasure. The thought of making her submit, of breaking her will, consumed him. He imagined her resistance, the way she would struggle, the fire in her eyes that would eventually give way to surrender. The more she resisted, the sweeter the victory would be. It excited him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Hunter was growing tired of these women playing him for a fool. He'd get Daphne back, and then she'd mate with him, whether she wanted it or not. She had dared to defy him, dared to slip through his grasp. He would find her, and when he did, he would make sure she never ran from him again. The thrill of the hunt coursed through his blood. Daphne was now his prey, and she would be his no matter what it took. Open corridors lined the castle's walls, bordered by delicate arched windows that bathed the space in the rich amber of the sky, streaked with hues of rose and lavender. It was as if the sun was forever on the brink of setting, casting the entire scene in a surreal, dreamlike glow. Now that Daphne thought about it, the light hadn't changed since she first woke up. It should have been nighttime by now, yet the light remained caught in time. While her human side delighted in being stuck in this magical hour, her animal instincts were confused and tense. Watching the horizon beyond the gardens, Daphne tried to make her way down the castle, aiming to find an exit through a labyrinth of hallways. But the corridors twisted and turned, sometimes narrowing to little more than a passageway, other times opening into wide verandas that always promised something new, a grand staircase leading downward, a hidden door, or another corridor lined with tapestries depicting scenes she couldn't quite place. Daphne didn't know if she was being guided along a gentle path or if the castle was playing with her, toying with her sense of direction. What was certain, though, was that this place was filled with magic, if not made from magic itself, and Daphne wasn't sure how to feel about that. She ought to be afraid, for magic tended to work as a double-edged sword. But a strange sense of peace ran through her, carried by the distant sound of a fountain's gentle splash echoing softly through the halls. Progressively, her pace became slower. There was no hurry, was there? What awaited her beyond this castle's walls anyway? Pain and disappointment. I'm quite hungry, though, she thought to herself. Eventually, just as that thought crossed her mind, Daphne arrived before a pair of tall, ornately carved doors. Beyond them lay a dining hall so grand it made her gasp. High ceilings adorned with intricate moldings and grand chandeliers sparkled light onto a long polished table laden with food. There were platters of roasted meats, their skins crisp and glistening with juices. Steaming dishes of creamy soups and buttery mashed potatoes sat beside towering arrangements of salads, the greens so fresh they seemed to have just been plucked from the garden. Desserts, too, were in abundance. Delicate pastries, rich chocolate cakes, and bowls of velvety custards, all dusted with powdered sugar or drizzled with sweet syrups, fill the table. Daphne's mouth waters as she takes in the scene, her hunger now an insistent force. She moves to the table, almost hesitant to disturb the perfection of the feast. then sits down in a plush, high-backed chair and reaches for a plate. As she begins to eat, each bite is more delicious than the last. The meat is tender and flavorful, the bread crisp on the outside yet soft within, and the fruits burst with sweetness. Most of all, the dining hall is silent, save for the soft clink of her silverware and the occasional rustle of fabric as she adjusts in her seat. Daphne, who has always lived amongst a pack, never had the luxury of eating in silence. She savors the quiet and solitude she's never known, overwhelmed with an acute sense of belonging. Daphne keeps telling herself it's time to go. She isn't sure how long she's been in this castle. Just as she'd suspected, it seems stuck in an eternal dusk, but she knows it's been a while. Surely she is starting to overstay her welcome, and whoever or whatever has brought her here will soon tire of her presence. Besides, peace and quiet are lovely, but one can't live alone forever, can they? And so, she paces hall after hall in search of an exit, determined to leave. But then something new catches her eye, and she thinks, just a moment longer. Surely she can enjoy this place just a little bit more. When will she ever get the chance to see things so enchanting again, beyond the confines of her reality? And then there's the matter of what awaits her outside, or rather, who. Now that she's had some peace and quiet and the pain in her arm has faded, Daphne can focus on what she'd heard prior to running away. Not only had her betrothed been cheating on her with his pregnant mistress, not only had he shown interest in her sister before settling on Daphne, but the man was dangerous. He was after their pack and would stop at nothing to take control of it. He'd gotten rid of Diana, or, if not directly, hadn't even thought to punish those who harmed her. What would he do to Daphne if she refused to mate with him? What would he do to her people? And most importantly, what could she do to stop him? She couldn't do it alone. Would her people even stand beside her to thwart Hunter? They'd all fallen prey to his charms, seeing him as nothing short of a savior, the perfect alpha, the perfect leader. Would anyone believe Daphne if she suddenly declared he couldn't be trusted to lead them? Perhaps Diana could have convinced the others to rally behind her. But Daphne? She didn't even have proof against Hunter and Jade. What could she do? As she crosses through a darker, dimly lit corridor, its walls covered in mirrors, she wishes she could gain some insight into what is happening back at the pack, what Hunter is doing now. And then she sees him, Hunter, right there in the reflection, staring back at her. There she stands, beside her reflection in the mirror to her right, so vivid and real that she yelps and spins around to confirm his presence. Her heart races with fear, but Hunter is nowhere to be seen, except within the reflective surface of the mirror. There he stands, his crow-like face contorted with fury. "I want her found," he declares to an unseen audience. "Search every acre of the forest. Have every single one of our people participate. Bring me back Daphne at once." The raw anger in his tone, the overwhelming authority, sends a shiver of horror through her. Is this why people admire him? Because of the underlying threat woven into his words? The fear of what he might do if disobeyed? Or is it because his power holds potential for allies who see opportunity in wielding something dangerous for their benefit? Hunter is a weapon best kept on your side, for who could stand against him and survive? Shame floods Daphne as she recalls how she herself once fell prey to his charms. Unlike her, Diana hadn't been fooled and had paid the price. Daphne collapses to her knees, overcome by grief. She would give anything to speak to her sister just once more, to hear what she would say about all of this. "To hell with it all," a voice booms behind her. Daphne gasps. There, in another mirror over her shoulder, stands Diana, tall, proud, and healthy, as she'd been before Jade's poison struck her. Daphne collapses to her knees, overcome by grief. She would give anything to speak to her sister just once more, to hear what she would say about all of this. "To hell with it all," a voice booms behind her. Daphne gasps. There, in another mirror over her shoulder, stands Diana, tall, proud, and healthy, as she'd been before Jade's poison struck her. Long, golden locks cascade past her shoulders. Her dark, mindful eyes brim with compassion. "Sister!" Daphne's heart swells with relief, threatening to burst. "How are you here? Are you all right?" "Never better," Diana smiles softly. "Don't worry about me, Daphne. I'm the eldest. It's my role to worry about you, not the other way around." Tears fill Daphne's eyes. "But you were gone," she whispers, reaching out toward her sister's image. "You were gone, and everything went so wrong." "Hunter is after our pack," Daphne continues, trembling. "He wants to mate with me." "That is out of the question," Diana snaps sharply. "He isn't a good man. He doesn't deserve you." "I know that," Daphne replies, her voice breaking. "But let me worry about the pack." "You're safe here in this palace," Diana reassures her gently. "Yes," Daphne murmurs, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. "It's given me everything I ever wanted. It's the most beautiful haven I've ever known." She sighs contentedly before remembering something important. "But what about you, sister? I'd miss you here." "Why? We're together now, aren't we?" Diana smiles, and she's right. Everything feels wonderful here, where Daphne is safe. There's no reason to worry, until a large hand suddenly covers Daphne's mouth, pulling her back into someone's arms. A deep male voice whispers against her ear. "Don't turn around, just walk straight ahead." Daphne wants to react, to thrash, escape, or scream in shock, but finds herself unable to do anything but obey. Her body betrays her, compelled to comply. One step forward, then another. "Good," the voice murmurs approvingly. The voice encourages Daphne as she moves along the mirrored corridor. "Keep going until you reach a flight of stairs," it says, then adds, softer and almost apologetic, "Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you." Daphne wants to scoff at that, but instead asks, "Where are we going?" She has a sense of self-preservation, and opposing whoever has taken control of her body doesn't seem particularly smart. "I'm taking you outside of the castle," the voice replies calmly. "I should have done so much sooner, but I didn't think it would enthrall you so quickly." "Enthrall me?" Daphne questions. "It is what it does," the voice answers, as if this explanation makes perfect sense. Daphne ponders his words as they pass through multiple enchanting rooms and gardens she'd love to linger in, but finds herself unable to. "Are you the one who brought me here?" she eventually asks. There's a beat of silence before the voice responds. "Yes, you were injured. I thought it best." Before Daphne can thank him, the man adds, "Though now I'm not sure I should have. I am sorry for shooting you. I was hunting for food. I didn't know you were a shifter. I haven't seen one in years." The flight of stairs appears, and with it comes an overwhelming urge Daphne has felt since arriving, a need to turn around, something she hasn't been able to do until now. She begins to twist her neck almost on instinct when the voice pleads, "Freeze. You will not turn around until I tell you to do so. Just follow my instructions." "Now go down the stairs." The stairs lead them to gardens below, a sea of green dotted with vibrant flowers in full bloom, their colors deepened by golden light. Why would you need to hunt for food? Daphne suddenly thinks to ask. There was plenty to be found here. That wasn't real food, the man replies. Only an enchantment. Enchantments don't provide nourishment, only the illusion of it. If you'd paid close attention, you'd find you're still hungry. Is she still hungry? Daphne doesn't feel like she is. The food had tasted real and, more importantly, fantastic. And yet her animal instincts are tense, unsatisfied, and eager to take over, urging her to address her own needs. You would have realized it eventually, the man says, not unkindly, as they reach large, towering gates at the bottom of steps that stretch across a good portion of the grounds. Stop here. Extend your right hand. Daphne obeys, unable to do otherwise. She hears the man's footsteps growing nearer until his presence is undeniable beside her frame. A small pack is extended toward her, one from which she can smell food. It doesn't smell nearly as delicious as the lavish dining hall meal earlier, but it awakens something in her nonetheless, something tangible and pressing. Leftover meat. I cooked it for you, the man says, taking a step back. It's not much of an apology, but there isn't anything else I can give you. Everything you've seen here will wither away and disappear once we cross those grounds. Please, Daphne interrupts, realizing she is about to be sent away. Can I stay here a little while longer? She doesn't even know where to go or what she plans to do when she eventually leaves. She knows she has to find a way to thwart Hunter and his pack, but how exactly is still unclear. And she'd rather figure it out here than alone in the woods. That's impossible, the man says, his voice sincere. It's not safe here. It's not safe out there either, Daphne protests hurriedly. There are people after me, after my pack. Still a better alternative than staying in the castle, believe me, the man cuts in sharply. Now go. Past the gates, walk for a good 10 minutes without turning around. Then you're free to do as you please. I beg you, Daphne pleads, finding herself complying despite her heart pounding wildly against the idea. You have nowhere to go. This is for your own good, she hears the man reply from a distance. He sounds sorry, perhaps even a little hesitant, but in the end, he concludes, I'm sorry you were ever here. And then, despite her protests, Daphne exits through the gates and walks. She walks across surprisingly familiar woods. She knows this part of the forest. She's been here before. She's barely an hour north of her pack's territory, dangerously close to Hunter's turf. When she finally stops in her tracks and spins around, she drops to her knees in stupor. The castle had been enormous. She should be able to see it even from here, rising above the tree line. But there's nothing. The castle is gone, almost like it had never existed in the first place. Daphne wanders through the woods aimlessly, her mind a whirl of confusion and disbelief. The dense trees around her form a nearly impenetrable canopy, their dark leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The once comforting warmth of the setting sun has faded entirely, replaced by the cool, inky blackness of night. Shadows stretch long across the forest floor, and the occasional hoot of an owl or the crack of a twig underfoot punctuates the silence. But the darkness itself does not frighten her. It's the unknown, the uncertainty of her situation that weighs heavily on her mind. Had she dreamed up that magnificent castle? And what of the man she had met there? His presence had been so overwhelming, it left her reeling. The memory of his voice, the way he had compelled her to follow his every word, lingers like a specter in her thoughts. Perhaps the injury to her arm had given her a fever. It seems improbable. Shifters rarely ever got sick, and had the capacity to heal from any injury far more quickly and efficiently than a human. Daphne herself had experienced rapid recovery from injuries before, so this should have been no different. But if this entire experience hadn't been a fevered dream, how could she not see the castle anymore? Daphne had tried going back on her tracks, searching for some trace of it to confirm she hadn't imagined it all. But no matter how far she retraced her steps, there was nothing, no trace of the grand structure that had seemed so vivid just moments ago. The structure that had loomed so imposingly in the twilight was gone, leaving only the small bundle of meat clutched in her hand as proof that her encounter with the castle and its enigmatic owner had been real. It was as if the place had vanished into thin air, abandoning her in the middle of the forest, stranded and bewildered. Who was that man? The question lingered in her mind even as she tried to push it aside. How had he managed to make her comply with every demand despite her initial resistance? An alpha had the power to command, but this level of obedience, this perfect submission to his will, was something Daphne had never experienced before. Not even Hunter, with all his strength and dominance, could have achieved such a thing. The thought of Hunter pulled her away from the mysterious castle, grounding her back in the harsh reality of her situation. She knew his persistence, his ruthless determination. If he was searching for her, it would only be a matter of time before he found her. There was a stillness in the air, an unnatural quiet that made her uneasy, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The trees around her seemed to close in, their towering forms creating a labyrinth of shadows and shapes. Daphne's mind raced, trying to piece together a plan, but exhaustion and lingering confusion clouded her thoughts. She didn't know where to go or what to do next. Shelter, that was what she needed. Somewhere safe where she could gather her thoughts and decide her next steps. But the forest was vast, and stumbling upon a safe haven felt like a distant hope. Shifting crossed her mind, but her injured arm made flying impossible for now, and her scent would grow stronger if she transformed, making her easier for Hunter to track. Even worse, shifting meant leaving her clothes behind, and without a destination, that was too risky. If only she had the power Diana and some of her people possessed, the ancient ability to shift into multiple forms. Most shifters were limited to one animal, living among others who shared similar traits. But Diana's pack retained the old ways. Some members could take on more than 10 different forms. Daphne, however, had always been restricted to her bird form. Sighing, she resigned herself to resting under a tree for the time being. A campfire was out of the question, so she curled up against the cold and drifted into an uneasy sleep. The sharp crack of a twig snapping woke her instantly. Daphne blinked, disoriented for just a moment before her eyes locked on to him. Hunter stood before her in wolf form, flanked by at least 2 of his men closing in from either side. "I just want to talk," Hunter said, shifting back into human form and raising his hands in a gesture of appeasement. Daphne sneered at him. "Is that why you've come with company? Why your men are surrounding me?" She braced herself, ready for whatever came next. The shift? Hunter can't turn into a bird, and neither can anyone from his pack. But then a familiar voice echoes from behind her. "Daphne, keep still, please. It is her father. Her father has come, and he very well can turn into a bird if he wishes to follow Daphne. What are you doing here?" she asks him, bewildered by this unexpected turn of events. She knew Hunter would be coming, but her father? "You ran away from your own mating ceremony," he says. "What did you expect, Daphne?" Hunter adds, smiling. Daphne used to find warmth in those smiles, choosing to see affection where there had only been contempt, a desire to bend someone to his will. What if I don't want to go home? She challenges. Don't be ridiculous, her father protests. Where would you even go? Live amongst humans? Find a job in one of their offices? You're a shifter, Daphne. You belong with your people. Some of us work alongside humans, Daphne protests weakly, though that's hardly the point. We've been educated to do so, to blend in, to better support the pack. Her father insists, you never showed any inclination towards such a path. You never asked, Daphne snaps before sighing. Do you even care what I want? Daphne, Hunter says calmly, though with an edge to his words, you're the beta of your pack, the last remaining heir to your alpha. I know this means something to you, so why are you suddenly acting so entitled? Entitled? Daphne gasps. Beside Hunter, her father visibly nods in agreement. This isn't like you, he adds. What could have possessed you to leave during the most important event of your entire life? I wasn't aware an arranged mating bond was to be the highlight of my existence, Daphne mutters, all the while trying to find a way out of this mess. If she shifts, her father will come after her. On a good day, she could lose him. She is a faster flyer with more experience in the skies. Daphne's father could also turn into a dog, a form he tended to prefer, but Daphne is still injured. Look, Daphne, all I want is your happiness, Hunter says. Is that why you got another girl pregnant? Daphne snaps back. To make me happy, obviously. This isn't the worst thing Hunter has done. There's also the matter of poisoning Diana, but she doesn't want to let on that she knows about that. Not yet. Who knows how Hunter would react? He could hurt her and her father to keep her quiet. Better to play the fool on that particular twist of events for now. Daphne, Hunter is an alpha male, her father says. You cannot expect him to save himself for one woman. Daphne gapes at him. Her father had been faithful to her mother all her life. She knew it. So why is he acting like the concept of fidelity is suddenly ludicrous? Are you really so afraid of him that you're willing to bend to everything he says? She asks, pointing toward Hunter. Her father grimaces. Apparently that means yes. We need him, her father says, more than you know. Diana didn't think so, Daphne argues. Enough. Hunter takes a step toward her. You promised yourself to me. You're mine, he says, stepping toward her, his gaze locking onto her neck. Oh, God. Is he planning to give her a mating mark here in front of everyone? Is he planning to force it on her? Stay where you are, Daphne warns, pressing her back against the tree she had been sleeping under. Her defensive stance only makes Hunter grin, his scent thickening into something dark and anticipatory. He's enjoying this, Daphne realizes, cornering her, the chase, her fear. He's enjoying all of it. Don't touch me, she protests as Hunter moves closer, unhurried, savoring each moment of his advance. It's not out of concern for her, Daphne thinks bitterly. He's just trying to drag this out. She tries to kick him away as he lunges forward, but he barely flinches at the blow, grabbing her arm and yanking her to her feet. Daphne, he smirks. That is not how an alpha's mate acts. Daphne bares her teeth at him. Though she may not shift into a wolf, the reflex comes naturally after growing up surrounded by wolf shifters. Hunter pulls her closer, and Daphne knows it's too late to shift now. She should have done so earlier, taken her chances against her father, but fear froze her. She'd always thought she'd fight or flee when threatened, yet here she stands, or rather trembles, like a deer caught in headlights, like a rabbit playing dead. She refuses to let the tears fall or shut her eyes as Hunter bends his head toward her neck, teeth bared and ready to bite. She wants him to remember the disdain and anger blazing in her eyes, not her fear. His teeth are inches from her skin when a voice cuts through the tension. Freeze. Daphne recognizes it immediately, the deep, smooth timbre of the castle's owner. Unlike everyone else present, she isn't surprised when her body suddenly locks in place. Hunter's eyes, which had been fixed on Daphne, go wide with shock. She would have smiled if she still had control over her muscles. "Who's there?" Hunter growls, his tone edged with danger. There's a soft snort from Daphne's left. Apparently, the mysterious castle owner finds Hunter amusing. "How bold of you to assume you could bear looking at me, shifter," the voice replies coolly. "But I wouldn't afflict it upon you, despite how despicable I find you to be." The words hang heavy in the air, punctuated by a brief silence. Even though Daphne can't move, she feels the weight of their meaning settle over her. "Close your eyes, all of you," the voice commands. Of course, Daphne obeys. She has no choice. The voice compels her completely. Then she hears quiet footsteps approaching. Cold fingers wrap around hers, icy but firm. "Come with me, Daphne," the castle owner says. To the others, he adds, "The rest of you, keep still until the sun rises." Daphne is pulled gently but firmly away, her only guide the cold hand clasping hers. Behind her, Hunter growls low and menacing. "If you think for 1 second I'm going to let you get away with this, you're a fool," he snarls. "Daphne is mine to be. I'll make sure you regret taking what's mine." By Daphne's side, her rescuer exhales sharply, unbothered by Hunter's threats. There's not a trace of concern in his voice as he replies, leading Daphne away. "You can try." The growl that rumbles deep in Hunter's chest is almost primal, a sound born of fury and wounded pride. He longs to curl his fingers into fists, for the nails to bite into his palms as he struggles to contain the rage threatening to explode within him. This was supposed to be simple. Daphne was supposed to be his to claim, his to break, his to possess. But now, some unknown rival has dared to interfere, to challenge him, and that is something Hunter cannot tolerate. Daphne, the one who slipped through his fingers, is now within the grasp of another. The very thought sends a dark thrill through him, a twisted excitement that only fuels his determination. The idea of another man touching her, holding her, infuriates him to the point of madness. He will find her, and when he does, he will make sure she knows exactly what it means to defy him. But this time, it won't just be about claiming her. It will be about revenge. Revenge on the man who dared to cross him, dared to challenge his dominance. Hunter's mind races with images of the confrontation to come. He can see it so clearly, Daphne trembling as she is dragged back to him, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. And the man, this so-called savior, will be reduced to nothing, his life snuffed out like a candle in the wind. Hunter will take great pleasure in it, savoring every moment as he exacts his revenge. He will make this rival suffer, make him pay for daring to stand between him and what is rightfully his. Then, with Daphne's spirit broken, he will ensure she never questions her place at his side again. His desire for Daphne has reached a fervent level of obsession, fueled by the thrill of the chase and the promise of conquest. Yet more than anything, he craves the moment when he will face this rival, the man who dared to take Daphne from him. A pathetic coward who hadn't even dared show his face. Hunter will take great pleasure in destroying him, piece by piece, until there is nothing left but the memory of the fool who thought he could challenge an alpha and live. By the time Hunter is done, the man will be begging for mercy. When Hunter is finally able to move again, his mind is so consumed with these thoughts that he remains standing still, his breath coming in harsh, ragged gasps. His men look to him uncertainly, but he barely notices them. Turning to his men, his voice is low, laced with barely controlled rage. "Spread out," he orders. "We're not leaving until we find them." His men nod, moving quickly to follow his command. The game is far from over. In fact, it is only beginning. Daphne occasionally jumps at the soft rustle of leaves or the distant creak of old trees swaying, but in the end, there are never any signs of pursuit. They've been walking for a good 15 minutes, and Hunter and the others are nowhere to be seen. "Guess you really weren't kidding when you said people were after you," the man says eventually, his voice calm but edged with curiosity. Breaking the silence that has settled around them like a heavy cloak, Daphne keeps her eyes closed, her hands still clasped in his cool fern grip as he guides her through the dense forest. The ground beneath her feet is uneven, a mix of soft earth and fallen leaves that causes her to stumble over what feels like the roots of ancient trees every now and then. But that steady hand in hers is always there, steadying her. "My father was amongst them," she says, more to herself than to her mysterious rescuer. She still can't believe it. He could have come after her alone, tried talking to her if he'd been so worried about her choices. In fact, he could have spoken to her about her union with Hunter and what it meant for the future of the pack months ago. But instead, he followed Hunter today. And for what? To make her feel guilty? The hand around hers tightens for the briefest second before it seems to relax, remembering itself. "Being betrayed by family is the worst kind of betrayal," her rescuer comments quietly. The forest is alive with the sounds of night, crickets chirping softly in the underbrush, the distant rustle of small animals moving through the leaves. The smell of rich earth and decaying leaves fills Daphne's nostrils, grounding her in the reality of the moment, even as her mind spins with the shock of what has transpired. Overwhelmed, she focuses on the sensation of his hand in hers, the steady rhythm of their footsteps as they navigate the darkened woods. "What's your name?" she asks finally. "Gray," comes the reply. Daphne thinks it's a strange name, but doesn't say it aloud. After a pause, she ventures another question. "Are you taking me back to your castle, Gray?" She can no longer stand to listen to the rapid beat of her own heart. "You're not my prisoner," he replies, tone sincere. "If you'd prefer, I can release you here, but you're welcome to hide inside the castle for now, should you wish to. No one will find you there." The castle is impossible to locate unless guided directly by me. Despite the relief his words bring, a magically untraceable castle does sound ideal. Daphne can't help but recall his parting words when he'd kicked her out earlier. He'd implied his castle was dangerous. "Did you build it yourself?" she asks, making Gray snort. "Sorry," he says. "I wasn't expecting that question. No, I'm not much of a constructor. The castle was created by a powerful magician, one who draws his magic directly from a demon." Daphne shivers at that. It doesn't sound particularly reassuring. "Why would such a magician gift you his castle?" "It was never his. He made it for me. I wished for it." "You wished for a demon-bound magician to make you a magical, hidden castle?" Daphne resumes, intrigued. "Yes," Gray says. Then, after a pause, adds wryly, "When you phrase it like that, it makes me sound like a downright fool." Daphne wisely chooses not to comment on that. Instead, she asks carefully, Is that why you said it was dangerous before? In part, he admits. It's a magic castle, somewhat unpredictable. If you insist on hiding away there, we'll need to come up with a plan too. Your safety is paramount, yet curiosity outweighs her fear. Can't you tell me exactly why it's so dangerous being here? Daphne asks. The castle will strive to make you content, for starters, the man replies, his tone measured. But too much comfort isn't always a good thing. This place isn't freedom, Daphne. It's the illusion of freedom. Daphne wonders what he means by that. She'd been impressed by his beautiful castle, perhaps a little too impressed. For while she'd been looking for a way out, she'd stopped in her tracks many times to admire it. How long would it have taken her to exit if Gray hadn't shown up? I've been told there's always a flip side to magic, she says pensively. It's never all as it appears. Indeed, I paid a hefty price for my castle, Gray confesses, adding nothing more on the matter. Would you like to stop here? He offers instead. You can shift back and fly away. You'll have the entire night to get away from this place. Daphne considers this. The castle could be a trap, an enchanting one, but a trap nonetheless. She's a shifter, raised to be wary of magic and any form of enchantment. But what choice does she have? You said the castle itself was dangerous for starters, Daphne notes. Is there something more besides that? She feels Gray tense. There is me, he says simply. Does he mean because he has the power to boss people around? She doesn't see what else he could mean. Gray hadn't given her any indication of ill intentions. If anything, he'd saved her twice now. You must have noticed I've avoided letting you see me, the man says, as if reading her mind. That's because if you were to look upon me, something terrible would happen to you. I see, Daphne says, swallowing hard. And can you tell me what exactly? I suppose I should, Gray agrees, though sounding almost sad about it. Yet he doesn't end up telling her anyway. They decide on a system. On the nights Daphne comes back to the castle, she'll be allowed to roam freely during the day while Gray hides away in his bedroom, the one place Daphne isn't permitted to enter, ever. And at night, when she catches up on sleep, he can go about his day instead. Time doesn't really matter anyway, since, at the castle, day and night blend into eternal dusk. Exactly, Daphne muses. So how will we know if it's actually day or night? Gray had gifted her a small golden watch, which indicated both the time and lunar cycle, to help her orient herself. Stay for as long as you need, he told her, but remember, all the food provided by the castle will not actually sustain you. You'll find bows and arrows in the stables outside should you like to hunt yourself. I can also leave you the meat from my kills in the kitchens downstairs if that helps. That had been kind of him to offer, and he'd kept his promise, despite her not seeing him again after her return. By his side, that was probably for the best, given what he'd told her. Everyone who looks upon my face becomes cursed, he warned her that night, his tone grave. Cursed, afflicted, doomed, whatever term one might choose. A single glance had already sealed the fates of more than enough unfortunate souls who'd crossed my path. I wouldn't wish such a curse upon my worst enemy, let alone you. So, if you value your safety and wish to remain hidden here, we must ensure you never accidentally catch even the smallest glimpse of my face. Daphne couldn't argue with that. She had no desire to be cursed. Thus, she followed Gray's instructions to the letter, spending her days exploring the castle or hunting for food while retreating to her bedroom at night in her bird form. In her avian shape, it was easier to discern reality from magic, spotting berries or insects concealed behind layers of enchantment. When roaming the grounds as a human, she took to planting things in the back gardens for herself and Gray, using seeds she discovered during her explorations as a bird. It was the least she could do by way of thanks. Yet, despite her efforts, her energy levels often waned, forcing her to rely on the cooked meat Gray left for her in the kitchen. True to his word, he provided it regularly, smoky, flavorful, prepared as though over a campfire. While eating wild game wasn't always safe, Daphne's shifter nature ensured she'd survive any illness she might contract. This thought led her to wonder about the extent of Gray's powers. Living in the castle felt strange, yet oddly comforting. Though she never saw him, Daphne was acutely aware of sharing the space with Gray. She remained cautious of encountering him, but also felt gratitude toward him. The vegetables she'd planted wouldn't be ready for some time, leaving her wondering how else she could express her thanks. The answer came naturally, or rather, Gray made it known roughly a week after her arrival. During one of her ongoing explorations of the castle, Daphne stumbled upon a drawing room bathed in warm afternoon light. It was peaceful, almost dreamlike, and she paused to sketch the castle as it appeared from above in her bird form. Her work lacked detail and polish. It had been ages since she'd last drawn, but she was interrupted when a stray bird flew past her window, prompting her to chase it away from her precious garden. The next day, she returned to the drawing room, only to find a small note beside her sketch. "Is that what the place looks like from the skies?" it read. The handwriting was elaborate, though slightly shaky, its elegant calligraphy unmistakably belonging to Gray. Not only could it hardly have come from anyone else, but the curves of the letters seemed to suit him in ways Daphne couldn't quite articulate. "Not exactly," she replied beneath his note. "Give me another day." And true to her word, the following evening, she left him a far more accurate version of her sketch, having taken care to capture every detail from her vantage point above. Daphne carefully imprinted the view of the castle as seen from above in her mind, replicating it with the utmost detail she could muster for Gray. At the bottom of the drawing, she added a small note of thanks. Almost immediately after writing it, she considered erasing the words, not only because her calligraphy paled in comparison to his, something she'd never thought would embarrass her, but also because her modest sketch felt insufficiently grateful for the favor Gray was granting her by allowing her to stay. In the end, unsure of what else to do, she left the note as it was. The next day, returning to the drawing room, Daphne caught herself feeling anxious about her host's response. Her anticipation peaked when she noticed a small note on her drawing table, replacing her sketch. Gray's words were tightly controlled, sparse, deliberate, yet some letters seemed to linger, trailing off like ghosts reluctant to let go. "Can you make more?" And so Daphne did. Hunter sat in the dimly lit room of the pack house, a sinister smile curling at the edges of his lips. He had already laid the groundwork, the perfect strategy to flush Daphne out of hiding and back into his grasp. It wasn't enough to simply hunt her down. He wanted to savor the process, to turn the very people she loved against her, to watch as her world crumbled around her until she had nothing left but him, no choice but to surrender. The pack was easy to manipulate. They were already on edge, their alpha, Diana, lying unconscious in that deep, unnatural sleep. All it took was a few whispered words, a carefully planted seed of doubt, and they would turn on Daphne without hesitation. After all, if there was one thing Hunter understood, it was fear, and how to wield it like a weapon. He leaned back in his chair, an idea slipping effortlessly into his thoughts. The perfect lie to ignite their anger and fear. Diana, their beloved leader, betrayed by none other than her own sister. The thought alone thrilled him. He could almost see it now, their eyes wide with horror, hands clenched into fists, voices rising in a crescendo of outrage and betrayal, all directed at Daphne. But he wouldn't stop there. Oh no, Hunter knew how to twist the knife deeper. By the time he was finished, Daphne would be a pariah, hunted by her own people with nowhere to turn. When he finally found her, she would be desperate, broken, and utterly alone. She would have no choice but to accept him as her mate, to submit to him completely if she wanted any hope of reclaiming her life. She would be his, and this time there would be no escape. There was just one loose end he needed to tie up before he could fully savor his victory, her mysterious savior, the rival who had somehow managed to interfere. He searched for this man tirelessly, scouring every lead, every rumor, but the trail always seemed cold. No shifter could have had that level of power over him, he was certain of that. But the man had possessed an unprecedented ability to control minds, paralyzing him with a single command. There weren't many who wielded such power, and Hunter's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. It is a place within the castle she both loves and hates, one she longs for as much as she dreads. The hall is unlike any other room in the castle, starkly different from the warm, glowing spaces bathed in perpetual golden light that pours in from the gardens. Here, the atmosphere is entirely different, cool and shadowed, as if bathed in the soft light of a hidden moon. The air is crisp, almost chilly, carrying a faint scent of night-blooming flowers that seem to whisper secrets as they sway in an unseen breeze. The corridor stretches endlessly before her, its floor covered in polished stone that feels like cool silk beneath her bare feet. Each step she takes is muted, absorbed by the strange, enchanted stillness that pervades the hall. Above her, the ceiling disappears into darkness, giving the unsettling impression of being under an open, starry sky, though not a single star is visible. It is as if she has stepped into a different world entirely, one that exists on the cusp of night and day, reality and dream. But it is the mirrors that dominate the space. They line the walls, each one tall and elegantly framed in ornate silver, reflecting not just Daphne's image, but a multitude of other scenes that shift and change with each passing moment. Some of the mirrors show the world outside, the world Daphne left behind. She can see the forest where she once ran free, the pack's territory with its familiar landmarks. Other mirrors show scenes from the past. Daphne sees herself as a child, playing with Diana in the woods, their laughter echoing through the trees. But it is the mirrors that show glimpses of the future, or what could be the future, that unsettle her the most. In one, she sees the pack, but they are different, fiercer, more united, with Diana standing at the forefront, strong and unyielding. In another, she stands by Hunter's side, children running about around them, and she hates how the vision fills her with hope, a tantalizing glimpse of what could have been. Except, could it have been? Hunter looks at her with love, the love Daphne used to imagine seeing behind his gaze, a love which, in her heart, doesn't ring true. Then there are the mirrors that Daphne can never quite understand, the ones that seem to show scenes in real time. In one, she sees Diana lying still in her coma, her face pale and serene, as if merely asleep. But the mirror is deceptive, for if Daphne lets herself think too long about how much she wishes Diana were awake, the image shifts. Her sister stirs, her eyes fluttering open, and suddenly she is looking at Daphne, truly seeing her. Sometimes Diana speaks, her voice soft and gentle, pulling Daphne deeper into the illusion. Daphne pleads with her sister, asking her to come home, to save her, to pull her back from the darkness that has claimed her before. But Diana's expression remains peaceful, almost content, as she tells Daphne how happy she is that her sister has found a place as wonderful as the castle. She urges Daphne never to leave it, though both know the weight of those words. It is hard to leave the halls, and harder still to return to them. Daphne knows the mirrors cannot be trusted, yet she cannot resist their pull. Drawn by a need she cannot fully explain, a need to see, to know, even if the truth remains just out of reach, she stands in the cool moonlit hall, surrounded by reflections of her past, present, and possible future. A strange sense of isolation washes over her, as though she exists in two places at once, here yet not here, caught between the world she knew and the one she is nowhere close to understanding. She stares at her own reflection for so long she barely recognizes herself. What is she even doing here? She should be thinking of a plan, a way to defeat Hunter, to reclaim her pack. This is a magical castle. Surely it holds answers. "Show me Hunter," she whispers to the mirror, bracing herself. "The real Hunter." The man appears before her, tall and proud, addressing a crowd with sweeping gestures to emphasize his message. Daphne is still missing, he declares, but have no doubt she will be found and brought to justice. His words make her frown in confusion. Justice? Why would she need to be brought to justice? Hunter's voice cuts through her thoughts. Not only has she tried to harm Jade after discovering she was with child, for she foolishly assumed the child was mine, but it turns out she intended to do so with the same poison she used on her own sister. Daphne gasps in shock as the image begins to dissolve, replaced by another, Hunter holding her in his arms, kissing her cheek. "No," she cries, her voice trembling. "No, I want to see. Show me what's real, please." The mirror obeys despite Daphne's fear and the wild pulse of her heart. Hunter reappears, standing before a crowd of familiar faces. There are friends and family among them, all gasping at his words, swallowing his lies whole. Daphne got rid of Diana, the woman I loved and planned to mate with, her own flesh and blood. And then she tried to harm an innocent woman and her child? He points accusingly at Jade, whose face is pale with fear. She must be found. She must be stopped. Who is with me? The crowd erupts into cheers. Daphne sees Laura clapping, her father too, though perhaps more reluctantly. It doesn't matter. They've chosen their side, and unsurprisingly, that side is Hunter's. For days, Daphne retreats into her art, drawing and redrawing the scene from memory. Hunter's distorted scowl, the crowd's exaggerated reactions. She tries to capture every detail, every pause, every lie. She works tirelessly, taking the sketches back to her room when exhaustion finally forces her to rest. For 3 days, she doesn't stop. She had never imagined feeling so abandoned and betrayed was possible. How could these people, who had known her entire life, who had seen her grow, now turn their backs so completely? Daphne, who had witnessed the love she felt for Diana, found it hard to believe that anyone could think she would harm her own sister. How could their trust turn into so much hatred and resentment just from the words of one man? No matter how much authority he held, was raw power and status really all that mattered in this world? Was it truly above the truth, capable of turning everyone she knew against her in an instant? If so, what was there even left to believe in? Beneath her drawing, Daphne writes, "I am alone." When the page is filled with no detail left hidden, she finds herself too drained to rise from her bed. She stays there, crying until there are no more tears, and wakes up one day, or perhaps one night, blurry-eyed and disoriented, to find a tray of food by her bedside and a note, "You're not alone." Daphne crumples the note in her hand and falls back asleep, welcoming the peaceful oblivion. Gray leaves food for her by the door, but she doesn't touch it. A weight has settled on her chest, unyielding and ever-present, casting a dreary shadow over everything. Waking is difficult, eating is difficult, thinking is unbearable. Everything feels laced with despair. She cries some more, but eventually doesn't have the strength for even that. One day, or maybe one night, she wakes to the sensation of something tied around her face, covering her eyes. "I would draw you something," Gray's voice says from her left, "but I'm not very good at it." He's sitting beside her. She can tell. His voice sounds uncomfortable, yet real, or so Daphne thinks. "Perhaps what you saw in the mirror wasn't real," he tells her. "Have you thought about that?" Daphne shakes her head briefly. It had been real. She knew it in her heart. Gray remains silent for a while, his hand grazing hers, cold as ice. "You'll wither away if you don't eat anything," he says finally. Then, after a pause, "How about we play a game of truth? Since you're so good at knowing what's real and what isn't, I'll tell you a story, and by the end, you'll tell me if it's real or not. And if you guess wrong, you'll have to eat a bite of food. And if I guess right," Daphne rasps, her voice barely audible, "I'll leave," Gray promises. Daphne sighs, burying her face in her pillow. "Do your worst." Gray briefly scratches his throat, a gesture Daphne suspects is for dramatic effect, and begins. "This is the story of a lone sailor who finds himself unexpectedly cast upon the shores of a desolate island. Stripped of the companionship and comfort of civilization, he faces the daunting task of surviving in a place where no other human soul has tread. Scrambling along the rugged coastline, he searches desperately for fresh water, food, and shelter. Each discovery, a small victory in the struggle to stay alive. He builds a shelter from the wind and rain. He learns to fish in the clear waters and finds sustenance in the plants that grow wild and free. The days turn into weeks and the weeks into months. Solitude weighs heavily on his soul. Yet, through all the hardship he endures, time, which at first seemed like an enemy, becomes his teacher. It shows him the value of patience, the strength in solitude, and the art of living with less. Gray interrupts himself there and adds nothing more. "Waiting, that's Robinson Crusoe," Daphne says, looking forward to being left just as alone as the fictional character who'd been on that island. "Actually," Gray says, a trace of amusement in his voice, "this is the story of Alexander Selkirk, the very real Royal Navy officer who spent years as a castaway on an uninhabited island. His story might have inspired Daniel Defoe, but, well, it happened nonetheless." Daphne opens her mouth to protest, only to find a bite of meat placed onto her tongue. "Eat," Gray says cheerfully. "No one likes a sore loser. How do you think you'd fare on a deserted island, completely cut off from civilization?" Daphne asks him days later. "It must be truly terrifying being so alone." But then she realizes that this is more or less how Gray has been living all this time. Sure, probably more comfortable than on an island with no shelter, but cut off and alone nonetheless. "I suppose I'd be relieved," comes the reply, and Gray leaves it at that. Gray tells Daphne new stories every day. While he initially settles on real-life events or famous works of fiction to coax her into eating, his tales eventually become more personal in order to keep her interested. I once knew a man of noble birth, a count who resided in a distant, isolated castle, he says. Rumors swirled around him, whispered tales of strange occurrences in his presence, people falling ill, inexplicable disappearances, and a sense of dread that lingered long after he had left a place. Those who encountered him often spoke of an overwhelming sense of unease, as if they were in the presence of something not entirely of this world. Though he lived in grandeur, his existence was marked by an insatiable hunger, a thirst that could never be quenched by ordinary means. He had a way of bending others to his will, drawing them into his dark orbit, leaving them changed forever. Was the man a vampire? Daphne asks. There is a beat of silence. Yes, Gray says. Was that man Dracula? Daphne guesses, pretty certain of herself. Though Gray doesn't answer for a long time, when he finally speaks, his words are heavy. That man was my father, he says, falling silent again. But it is not a peaceful silence. Rather, it is an expectant one, a question in itself. His father was a vampire, Daphne thinks. He isn't joking. Beside her, Gray shifts. He doesn't usually shift. In fact, he tends to be very still and very quiet. And his hands, she realizes, are always cold. There is also the matter of his power, the fact that he can command people at will. He's been in this castle for a very, very long time. Perhaps not 500 years old, but a long time nonetheless. She thinks of asking him for confirmation. Are you the vampire, she could ask, though she feels as though she already knows the answer. Vampires cannot be made. The condition is hereditary. They are all born human, though those bearing a gene come back to life should they die too early. Daphne wants to ask Gray how he died, for he would have had to die to become a vampire. Vampires are magically kept alive through blood magic. Blood they must consume, otherwise they'll drop dead once more. Where have you been finding blood? Daphne thinks. And then another thought crosses her mind. Are you interested in my blood? In the end, though, she says none of that, keeping her thoughts to herself. Beside her, she feels Gray subtly relax. The sunlight feels warm upon Daphne's skin. It is rather nice. Would you like me to leave so you can enjoy the gardens alone? Gray asks. You need to be blindfolded when I'm around, but if I left... Don't go, Daphne says quickly. When he's not there to distract her, she thinks about what the mirror had shown her, the danger lurking outside the castle gates. But mostly, she thinks of how ugly the world is. She'd really rather not see it anymore, especially if that meant keeping Gray by her side. Just tell me another story, she says. This is where the narrative shifts, where we arrive at the part of the story where Daphne meets someone new. Some of the events that follow, I can attest to personally because I was there to witness them. Everything leading up to this moment, Daphne's relationship with Hunter, her arrival at the castle, her meeting with Gray, I've shared based on what Daphne eventually confided in me. But this next part, I will tell you from my perspective. You may recall earlier in the story when Gray had just rescued Daphne from Hunter in the woods. He told her about the origins of his castle, how he'd made a wish to a powerful demon-bound magician who created said castle for him. Well, I was trailing that powerful magician through the woods at the time, silently cursing in my head that this was not how I envisioned my evening going. At this point, I'd never heard of Daphne or Gray. I was simply hiding behind a tree trunk, trying not to lose sight of my boss amidst the underbrush of some random dark forest. I'd been working for Adrian, that's the magician's name, for a little over a year. Supposedly, I served as his assistant, though that was just a glorified way of saying I cleaned up after him, welcomed potential clients into his shop, and, last but not least, tried to keep him alive, which was by far the trickiest part. Adrian might have been immortal, but he had no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. Thus, I trailed after him through the woods. He hadn't wanted to tell me where he was going that evening. I'd caught him sneaking out, and I just knew that meant he'd be off doing something stupid he didn't want me to know about. It had been a good hour of forest hiking by now. It was cold, and I was growing tired. I might have given up and gone home if Adrian hadn't. Adrian stopped abruptly, lowering himself to sit by a large oak tree. With deliberate care, he tied a blindfold around his eyes and remained there in silence, alone, blindfolded, and eerily still. It wasn't the strangest thing I'd ever seen him do, but it was close. I crouched behind a bush nearby, watching and waiting. Thankfully, I didn't have to wait long. Nearly 10 minutes later, a figure appeared, a tall, broad silhouette cloaked entirely in black. The cloak obscured every feature, yet given his build, I assumed it was a man. He exchanged a few quiet words with Adrian, grasped his hand to help him up, then guided him away by the shoulder. They moved swiftly through the woods, leaving me little time to process what was happening. Rising quickly, I followed at a cautious distance, close enough to keep them in sight, but far enough to remain unseen. The night was pitch black, the towering trees cast in ominous shadows overhead. Every snapped twig underfoot sent my heart racing, though neither Adrian nor the cloaked figure seemed to notice. The woods stretched endlessly before us, and with each passing moment, unease coiled tighter in my gut. My mind raced with unanswered questions until something extraordinary happened. In an instant, the oppressive darkness dissolved into warm, golden light. It felt as though I had crossed an invisible threshold, stepping from one realm into another. The transition was so sudden, so complete, that I nearly stumbled in shock. Halting in my tracks, I stared ahead where moments ago dense forest had stood. Now, a breathtaking castle rose before me, its spires reaching skyward, bathed in the soft glow of perpetual dusk. Smooth, pale stone formed its walls, while arched windows reflected the light like countless tiny stars. For a moment, all I could do was gape, overwhelmed by its beauty and impossible grandeur. The castle exuded a quiet magic, almost alive, drawing me closer with an irresistible pull. I watched as Adrian and the cloaked figure approached the grand entrance. Massive wooden doors swung open silently before them, swallowing their forms as they stepped inside. Shaking off my awe, I hurried forward, slipping through just as the doors closed behind them with a soft echo. Inside, the wonder only deepened. Long, winding corridors were adorned with intricate tapestries, and the air carried a faintly sweet floral scent that clung to everything. My footsteps fell silently on plush carpets as I trailed after them, my pulse thundering in my ears. The man led Adrian deeper into the castle, and I followed, unsure of what awaited, but certain I needed to uncover the truth. Adrian was led deeper into the castle through a labyrinth of twisting hallways and past rooms so grand they seemed almost overworldly. They finally halted in front of an immense ornate door, which the cloaked figure pushed open with a gloved hand. I hesitated, pressing myself against the wall as they entered, then quickly ducked behind a nearby pillar to observe. The room they had stepped into was a lavish sitting area, filled with plush furniture and softly glowing lamps. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with books and trinkets, while a large fireplace crackled warmly at the far end, its flames casting flickering shadows across the space. The cloaked figure guided Adrian to a chair, helping him sit down. For a moment, I thought this might be the moment the man would remove Adrian's blindfold. He'd guided him here like this to conceal the location of his secret magical castle. Now that they were inside, there seemed no reason to keep Adrian in the dark. But the man did nothing of the sort. "Welcome back, old friend," he said instead, prompting a faint smile from Adrian. I might have felt more reassured if the man hadn't been fully draped in his cloak. It was as though the universe heard my thoughts, because at that exact moment, a gust of wind swept through the room, lifting the hood from the man's head. I found myself staring at his face, utterly bewildered. Not long after, Daphne entered through a door opposite me. By then, Gray, whose name I'd learned earlier, had donned his cloak once more. I instantly recognized Daphne as a shifter, having encountered many before. Her energy was unmistakable. Shifters carried a certain aura, an untamed wildness that made one uneasy, as though facing a magnificent yet potentially dangerous creature. They tended to be tall, athletically built, and prone to impulsive behavior. But Gray? He was something else entirely. Beneath the cloak, he exuded none of those traits. Instead, there was a quiet, almost eerie stillness about him, a sense of restrained power that commanded attention. His face was striking, bordering on surreal. Chiseled features, luminous porcelain skin, too flawless to belong to any human, and silver eyes brimming with ancient sorrow. Those eyes reminded me of how Adrian often stared into space for hours, lost in thought. "Daphne," Gray said, guiding her toward a seat, "this is my good friend Adrian, the magician." Daphne spoke quickly, her tone sharp but polite. "I suppose I should thank you for building us such a beautiful castle." Adrian smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. His lips twitched slightly at the corners, revealing the insincerity behind the gesture. "Nice to meet you," he replied, attempting, and failing, to sound genuinely friendly. Meanwhile, I took another look around the castle. It resembled something out of a fairy tale, a place that defied reality, a dreamlike sanctuary brought to life. Adrian's magic knows no bounds, but the fact that he built this castle himself makes me feel small and uncomfortable. As I ponder this, Gray explains Daphne's situation to Adrian. Daphne's pack was taken over by a malicious alpha shifter who framed her for crimes she didn't commit. He turned her people against her, leaving her with nowhere to go. "Sorry to hear it," Adrian replies, though he doesn't sound particularly sympathetic. "He's such an unsociable grump sometimes, though that doesn't seem to deter Daphne." "Since you're such a powerful magician and Gray's friend," she begins, only for Adrian to cut her off. "Don't tell me you convinced her to make a wish." I hold back a sigh. When Adrian is forced to grant another life-altering wish, and he must if his client insists, it puts him in one of his sulking moods for weeks. I can't even imagine how he'll react if he has to interfere with someone he knows and considers a friend. "Did you tell her all wishes come at a price?" Adrian presses. "He did tell me," Daphne tries to explain. "He said the price was the thing I care about most." Adrian rubs the bridge of his nose, still hidden under his blindfold. "The thing you care about most?" Daphne repeats, sounding startled. "It isn't usually what you think it is," Adrian adds coldly. "And you'll almost certainly regret it for the rest of your life if you make your wish. Most people do." His tone is neutral, as if it doesn't affect him at all, but it clearly does. "What did he take from you?" Daphne asks, blindly reaching for Gray. She sounds worried. Guess she likes him already, even without seeing his tragically beautiful face. "My last chance at happiness," Gray mutters, making me roll my eyes. No wonder he's friends with Adrian. He's just as melodramatic. But that's no excuse for blaming Adrian for his troubles. Knowing Adrian, he would have warned Gray about the consequences of his wish. While he can't tell clients in advance what their most precious thing is, he does warn them about regretting its loss once it's gone. Really, it serves Gray right for making a stupid wish to a shady magician in the first place. What had he needed a grand secret castle for anyway? "Oh," Daphne suddenly exclaims, looking around. "Why is your friend waiting outside?" I freeze. Adrian and Gray freeze too. A brief, uncomfortable silence fills the room. "What, friend?" Adrian asks, his tone so chilling it could freeze blood. Daphne grows even more uneasy than before. "The human girl, over there," she squeaks, vaguely pointing in my direction. Though blindfolded, Adrian couldn't see me. I could smell her from here. Before I know it, Adrian jumps to his feet, yanking off his blindfold and storming toward me furiously. "Iris," he growls in a tone that might have made me gulp a year ago, but now only earns an eye roll. I brace myself for one of his dramatic outbursts. I'm surprised when he closes in on me, his emaciated face paler than usual. My confusion deepens into outright stupor as I notice his fingers trembling when he places a hand over my eyes. "Did you see him?" he asks. He's not angry. I quickly realize he's terrified. "Who?" I ask, confused. Adrian being depressed, angry, or drunk is normal, but scared, that's new and unsettling. "Gray," he snaps, "the vampire who led us here." A flicker of understanding crosses my mind. Yes, vampires are eerily beautiful. Gray must be one. It makes sense now. Still, Gray was the first vampire I'd ever met, so I hadn't pieced it together before. "Did you see his face?" Adrian insists, shaking my shoulders. "Nope," I lie smoothly. Unlike him, I value self-preservation too much to admit seeing his friend's face if it upsets him this badly. The last time I annoyed him, he ignored me for a month. Adrian sags in relief at my denial. "You swear?" he asks, voice shaking. It tugs at something inside me, an urge to comfort him, though I know from experience that comforting Adrian never works. Probably why I've become such a skilled liar. It comes in handy. "Cross my heart," I say lightly. "Hope to die, stick a needle in my—" "Shut up," Adrian grunts irritably. Later, seated beside a crackling fire they don't actually need, the castle is warm and bright, Daphne speaks softly to Gray after Adrian and I have left. She's blindfolded, yet the sounds of the burning wood and the scent of smoke make her feel safe. Somehow, the castle seems aware of this, conjuring the flames without prompting. "I was expecting an old man," Daphne says thoughtfully, "but that magician guy sounded young." Gray snorts briefly. "He looks young, too," he replies. Though Daphne hasn't seen Adrian due to her blindfold, she trusts Gray's words. "Believe me, he's old, perhaps even older than me." Daphne frowned slightly. "You've been stuck here a long time, haven't you?" she asks quietly. Beside her, she hears one of Gray's soft, resigned sighs. "When I became a vampire," he begins, "after the initial shock wore off, my father approached me. I'd never known him. He hadn't been part of my life until then. He explained what I was, taught me how to use my powers, the mind control thing." "Yes," Daphne prompts. "And a few other abilities common to all vampires," he continues. "But what my father didn't expect was that I harbored special gifts. Some vampires possess powers others don't. Mine worked only on humans, and maybe other species, but not on vampires. I didn't understand it at first, neither did he. Daphne interrupts hesitantly. Is this power what you call your curse? Gray falls silent for a moment, then answers. Yes, at first I was pleased with it, but eventually it turned against me. It isolated me, made living among humans impossible. That's why, after hearing about Adrian, I decided to travel. I requested a hidden castle, one so concealed no one could stumble upon it by chance. My plan was to invite other vampires to stay and enjoy its grandeur, which is why I had Adrian design everything to be so magnificent. Most vampires, having lived long lives, possess significant wealth and wouldn't settle for anything less than perfection. Adrian warned me of the potential consequences when I made my wish, and he's felt guilty for granting it ever since. That's why he visits me every month. Still, it isn't his fault. I made the wish, and I have no one to blame but myself. At the time, I thought I had nothing to lose, so I went ahead with it. What I didn't realize was that what I cherished most was the fact that my curse didn't affect other vampires. They were my last chance at forming emotional connections. But now, since my wish, the curse affects them too. Won't you tell me what it is? Daphne insists, reaching for his hand. Gray lets her take it and squeeze it gently. You always mention how terrible it is, but you've never explained. Everyone who looks at me falls irrevocably and obsessively in love with me, Gray says, making Daphne fall silent. She tries to imagine it, people seeing Gray and falling for him, but struggles to understand why it's such a burden. She supposes it must be isolating. It isn't just love, Gray clarifies. Obsessively in love. When I don't return their affection or agree to live by their side, the victims of the curse wither and die from a broken heart. Daphne bites her lip. That doesn't sound good at all. That's why I can't accompany you on your rescue mission, he tells her sadly. Earlier, when Adrian and I were still present, it had been decided that while Daphne couldn't make her wish to get rid of Hunter, she could attempt to save the one person who might have the power to stop him, her sister. I don't know many poisons that can keep a shifter asleep for so long, Adrian had explained then. And whatever it is, it must be administered daily to keep affecting her. If you can get her away from whoever is feeding her the poison, I guarantee she should wake up and recover quickly. Daphne had resolved that she owed it to her sister, and perhaps her pack, to try. I hate what your pack has done to you, Gray continues, but I'd hate even more to inflict my curse on someone else, especially on you. I can't risk coming along when you won't be blindfolded. Daphne assures him she understands, though an uncomfortable feeling lingers in her chest. Sneaking back home and into Diana's room proves logistically simple. All Daphne has to do is shift into her bird form. Once inside, the familiarity of the darkened hallways and the soft creaks of the old wooden floorboards feel like second nature. She moves silently, with little hesitation, her surroundings eerily quiet, except for the distant rustle of wind through the trees outside. The soft, steady breathing of those asleep fills the air as she moves through the pack house. A heavy, uncomfortable weight begins to settle over her, difficult to pinpoint at first, but growing into an almost unbearable unease with each passing moment. It starts with the colors, dull, muted, lifeless, mirroring the house itself and the air around her, thick and suffocating. Each breath requires more effort than it should. The once familiar creaks of the floorboards, though subtle, grate harshly against her ears, which have grown accustomed to the melodic sounds of Gray's castle. It isn't the looming danger of encountering Hunter and his men that makes Daphne feel so painfully out of place in her own home. It's the realization that she's been hiding away in a small slice of paradise. Once one grows used to paradise, even home can feel like a desolate pit of despair. The sight of Diana, still and silent in that unnerving deep sleep, does nothing to ease Daphne's discomfort. Instead, it stirs a surge of determination mixed with a pang of nostalgia for the life she left behind. But there's no time to dwell on such thoughts. Moving quickly, she rummages through Diana's wardrobe, finding clothes that will fit her, a plain blouse and a pair of comfortable pants designed for ease of movement. She dresses swiftly, the scent of Diana's clothes enveloping her, bringing with it a flood of memories she forces herself to push aside. Even so, she can't shake the feeling that everything outside the castle is less vibrant, less alive, less welcoming. The warmth of Gray's world, with its soft light and perfect stillness, calls to her. And for a fleeting moment, she wonders if she could ever truly return to a life that now seems so stark and unforgiving by comparison. Steel settles into her resolve as she gently lifts Diana from the bed, careful not to jostle her too much. Diana is lighter than Daphne remembers, too light, and the thought sends a sharp ache through her chest. Adjusting her sister's limp arms over her shoulders and hooking them under Diana's legs, Daphne summons every ounce of strength to rise to her feet, bearing Diana's full weight. Gritting her teeth against the strain, she steadies herself before beginning the arduous task of navigating the house. Every step must be measured now, balancing the need for speed with the necessity of silence. Corridors that were once easy to slip through now seem endless, each creak of the floorboard beneath her feet echoing louder than it should. Shadows stretch deeper, more menacing, as though the walls themselves are watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. This house, this reality outside the castle, feels oppressive, as if the world itself presses down upon her. Her muscles burn with the effort of carrying Diana, but she cannot afford to falter. Every sound seems amplified, reverberating through the suffocating quiet, pushing her senses to their limits. Stillness blankets the night, the faint rustle of her clothes, the quiet scrape of her shoes against the floor, and the soft rhythmic sound of Diana's breath against her neck. Daphne's heart pounds in her chest, but she forces herself to stay calm, focusing on the task at hand. Yet, in the back of her mind, the thought of Gray's castle lingers, its warmth and beauty a stark contrast to the cold, harsh reality she now faces. When she finally reaches the back door, relief floods through her, but only for a moment. The most treacherous part is still ahead. She pushes the door open carefully, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges, and steps out into the cool night air. The forest looms ahead, dark and thick with shadows, but to Daphne, it feels like a sanctuary, a place where she and Diana can disappear, if only for a little while, until she can find Gray in the castle again. The thought of returning to that perfect place makes everything else seem dull and lifeless. The path to the wheelchair she has hidden is rough, uneven, and littered with roots and stones that threaten to trip her at every turn. The weight of Diana on her back grows heavier with each step, her muscles trembling with the effort to keep moving forward. When she finally reaches the spot where she has hidden the wheelchair, she nearly collapses with relief. Carefully, she eases Diana off her back and into the chair, her arms shaking with the effort. She takes a moment to catch her breath, her chest heaving, before wiping the sweat from her brow and adjusting Diana in the seat, making sure she is comfortable. The castle has made her feel as though life could be easy, as though everything could be beautiful and serene. But now, faced with the reality of her situation, Daphne realizes just how much that ideal world has affected her perception. The hardest part is over, but the journey is far from complete. With a deep breath, Daphne begins to push the wheelchair down the narrow, overgrown path, moving as quickly and quietly as she can manage. The forest may provide them with cover, but it also makes the journey slow and arduous. Each step reminds her of the stark difference between the life she has known in the castle and the harshness of the world outside. She can't help but wonder if this is why Gray chooses to remain hidden within those walls, not just because of the curse that makes him hide, but because the outside world is simply too hard to bear. Now Daphne's mind races as she pushes forward, thoughts of what awaits them ahead, battling with the fear of being discovered. There is no turning back now. Gray waits for her by the tree they agreed on, ready to lead her and Diana back to the castle. The sight of him, his tall, broad figure, immediately fills Daphne with warmth and relief. She may not be able to see him clearly, but she knows his scent and the sound of his voice almost better than she does her own sister's face at this point. He is wearing his hood and mask, his familiar protection against the curse that has kept him hidden for so long. But even cloaked in shadow, his presence is enough to steady her resolve. The sisters are quickly blindfolded, his movements gentle yet efficient. Even through the fabric covering her eyes, Daphne senses the care in his touch, the way he handles Diana as if she's the most precious thing in existence, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. Reaching out, Daphne places her hand on his shoulder, grounding herself against the solid strength beneath her fingers, reminding herself that she isn't alone. The journey through the forest is slow and deliberate, each step measured with precision, but Daphne's heart races with anticipation. She can't see the castle yet, but she feels it drawing nearer, its pull growing stronger with every stride they take. By the time the warm air of the castle brushes her face and the soft sounds of garden streams reach her ears, she's nearly bursting with the urge to remove the blindfold and drink in its beauty. The thought of being back within those walls, surrounded by the serenity and comfort only this place offers, is almost overwhelming. She longs to open her eyes, to let the golden light wash over her, to breathe in the eternal fragrance of flowers blooming under a perfect sky. But she doesn't. Of course, she wouldn't betray Gray's trust or risk even a fleeting moment of weakness that might lead her to look at him. Not only does she fear the curse that could make her fall obsessively in love with him, as he warned, but more than anything, she couldn't bear causing him pain. The idea of him suffering because of her actions is unbearable. Gray has done so much for her, rescuing her, standing by her side when her entire pack, her family, turned their backs. He didn't just give her shelter, he gave her hope when none remained, a reason to keep going when everything seemed lost. With Diana safe in his arms and Daphne's hand resting lightly on his shoulder, they move through the winding halls of the castle. Each step brings them closer to the quiet peace, the warmth and light that Daphne now knows she cannot live without. As they reach their destination, the blindfold still firmly in place, an overwhelming sense of gratitude fills her, not just for the castle that shelters her, but for the man who has made it her home. Settling Diana onto a bed beside hers, Daphne feels hope begin to bloom in her chest. Soon her sister will wake, and together they'll ensure Hunter never tries to seize control of their pack again. Together, they'll free their people from his influence. And then Daphne will rejoin the pack. Her heart twists painfully at the thought. Will she leave the castle forever? The mere idea sends her mind spiraling into panic. She's never felt like this before, not even during the darkest days in the woods, facing Hunter and her father. How can she possibly contemplate never returning here, to this light, these streams, these gardens? "Are you all right?" Gray asks softly, briefly squeezing her shoulder. She cannot imagine never returning to him. She could forget the castle and its magic, perhaps, if she had to, but she could no longer envision a life she didn't share with Gray. He had become her best friend, her confidant, her anchor. Never in her life had she felt so close to another person, so fully understood. To be deprived of this connection now felt like a life not worth living. She didn't want to leave this place ever again. The life she'd built here with Gray, this was what she wanted for herself now. Not the pack, not Diana. Of course she would help them, but they weren't who she wanted to choose to spend the rest of her life with. "Daphne," Gray insists gently. But would he even want her to remain? He'd been more than kind, letting her stay by his side despite the impediment of his curse. He'd done so because he was kind, because he'd known how dangerous the outside world was for her. But once she'd dealt with the threat, once it was gone, she'd have no excuse not to follow her sister back home. Would Gray allow Daphne to stay? She opens her mouth, heart lodged in her throat, unsure how to phrase the question, but knowing she has to ask. Before she can, a voice booms across the room, loud, brash, insufferable. "So this is where you've been hiding all this time, Daphne." She doesn't need to remove her blindfold to know who just walked into her room, into her safe haven. It's Hunter. How did he find the castle? Did he follow them back? He must have. Daphne realizes in horror that the castle cannot be found without Gray leading the way. Hunter must have known Daphne would eventually return for Diana, and, upon seeing her take her sister away, followed them here. He'd found Gray and his sanctuary because of her. This was all her fault. "Stay where you are," Gray's voice booms across the room, and for a brief moment, Daphne breathes a sigh of relief. But then heavy steps echo across the wooden floor, and Hunter's scent, dark and sour, fills the air around them. "I don't think so," he says, a smirk evident in his tone. He doesn't sound overcome with anger, but his scent doesn't lie. He is beyond furious, murderously so, and Daphne instinctively shrinks back until she feels Gray's hand settle onto her shoulder. "Keep still," he says. "Keep your blindfold on." Daphne nods, though she doesn't know if he sees it. "Not so confident now without your mind control ability, are you?" Hunter taunts, pacing around the room. Daphne doesn't think he's getting closer, just moving about, restless. "Do you want to know why it doesn't affect me anymore?" he presses, filling the silence Gray leaves behind. "I don't particularly care about anything you have to say," Gray replies truthfully. Hunter roars, and suddenly there's a commotion by Daphne's side. Gray's hand leaves her shoulder, and the room erupts with the sound of violence, a sharp crack of fist meeting flesh, followed by the heavy thud of bodies colliding. Daphne flinches at the intensity of it, every sound amplified by the darkness behind her blindfold. The air grows thick with tension, charged and suffocating. The air around her thickens with the sour, acrid scent of Hunter's rage, so potent it churns her stomach. His heavy breathing fills the space, deep, labored, and interwoven with low, guttural growls slipping from his throat. He is a predator pushed to the edge, driven by fury and bloodlust. "I lost everything because of you," Hunter yells, throwing punches she cannot see. Daphne's mind conjures vivid images. Hunter's massive form, muscles straining as he swings at Gray with brutal force, while Gray moves with elegant composure, dodging with a predator's grace and striking back with precision. First Daphne, then my pack. Your pack? Gray asks, his tone calm despite the chaos. That was the price, comes the reply. For what I've made. Daphne hears the sickening sound of flesh tearing, the metallic tang of blood filling the air, mingling with the overwhelming stench of Hunter's fury. The heavy thuds of Hunter's fists pounding against walls, furniture, anything within reach are sharp and chaotic, contrasting sharply with Gray's almost silent but deadly efficiency. I lost my title, my power, everything, Hunter screams, a mix of pain and rage. Daphne's heart races, her hands clenching into fists as she fights the urge to rip off the blindfold and witness the scene unfolding before her. But Gray's earlier command echoes in her mind. Keep your blindfold on. She knows she must obey, even as her senses drown in the chaos surrounding her. But at least you'll get what you deserve, Hunter spits out, his scent shifting, growing more sour and bitter as frustration mounts. Daphne can almost picture his face twisted with rage, eyes wild, realizing that Gray isn't as easily overpowered as he assumed. When I touch your face with this gemstone, it's all over, Hunter declares, sounding triumphant now, boisterous. My face? Fear creeps into Gray's tone. No, wait. There's a sound of fabric ripping, followed by something or someone being thrown across the room, crashing into the far wall with a resounding thud. For a moment, there's only the labored breathing filling the silence. You've already lost, Hunter, Gray says, his voice heavy with sorrow. I'm sorry. The silence that follows is worse than the violent echoes of their fight. Unable to bear it any longer, Daphne rips off her blindfold, breathing a sigh of relief upon finding Gray's back turned to her. Hunter faces her, or rather faces him. Gray's cloak lies discarded on the floor across the room, and Hunter stares directly into his exposed face. A short while later, Diana awakens, which brings some relief. By then, Hunter has transitioned from declarations of hatred to declaring his love for Gray, entering the begging stage, a pitiful sight even Daphne admits. Gray locks him up safely in a room, though he refuses to deal with the shifter anymore. Guilt and regret weigh heavily in his voice as he speaks to Daphne, who tries to comfort him. They all have the same look in their eyes, he murmurs softly. A feverish, haunted look lingered in their eyes. Her friends, innocent strangers, families, all of them carried it. Once recovered, Diana quickly dismissed the idea of leaving Hunter in Gray's care. She cared little for the Alpha's well-being, but at Daphne's insistence, she reluctantly agreed that having him cursed and unstable near Gray would only worsen his fragile mental state. Besides, Diana added, her tone sharp, he's so obsessed with Gray, we can probably use that to make him confess to his crimes if he wants any chance with him. Daphne shrugged, not fully convinced, but motivated by one goal, getting Hunter away from Gray so her friend could recover. Since the confrontation with Hunter, Gray had become withdrawn and subdued, a shadow of himself, and Daphne didn't know how to fix it. Removing Hunter seemed like a start. Together, the two sisters dragged the shifter back to the pack house, though not before Daphne made Gray promise to meet her at their usual spot in the woods in 2 weeks. There's still much to say, she told him, searching for the right words. But everything she came up with felt wrong against the backdrop of Gray's deepening sadness. It wasn't just about Hunter. Daphne understood this. The incident had stirred old wounds, waves of guilt and regret consuming Gray alive. "I'll be back in 2 weeks," she assured him as they parted ways. "I promise." The journey home was heavy with unspoken tension. When they arrived at the pack house, what was once a place of strength and unity now felt tainted by betrayal and chaos wrought by Hunter's actions. Jade greeted them, her gaze sharp and calculating, the weight of leadership evident on her shoulders. Daphne felt the truth hit her hard. They hadn't exaggerated. Hunter was no longer alpha. He'd been replaced, not by someone worthy, but by someone who seized power amid turmoil. Diana's fury erupted the moment they stepped inside. Without hesitation, she confronted Jade, her voice laced with anger and disgust. "You've taken over in his stead, but don't think for a second we'll forget what happened here." Jade met her glare without flinching. "I don't wish to cause further conflict," she replied coolly. "We'll agree to a truce. My pack will leave yours alone." Daphne watched the exchange, her heart heavy. Seeing Hunter, once so powerful, reduced to pleading desperation, filled her with both pity and revulsion. Yet Diana's fiery resolve kept her grounded. Hunter's downfall stemmed from his own betrayals, lies, and the suffering he inflicted. While Jade's promise of peace brought some relief, it felt hollow, a temporary reprieve in the wake of shattered trust. Something irreparable had happened to her alpha, the father of her child, and the man she loved. Something Jade cannot explain. No peace treaty, no alliance can ever truly rebuild what has been broken. This is why Diana insists she needs Daphne, that her sister cannot possibly think of leaving to return to Gray in the castle. She claims Daphne's place is by her side, that together they can ensure the pack never falls into the wrong hands again. And Daphne loves her sister. She really does. Once, she would have taken her up on the offer in seconds, for she had been brought up to want nothing more than the pack's well-being. But something broke in her when they all turned against her, when Hunter betrayed her, and her father too. She is no longer the trusting girl she used to be, and she may never be again. Mostly, though, she cannot imagine a life away from the castle, away from Gray. This is where she needs to be. Diana claims to understand, but she doesn't. "That place isn't life, Daphne," she says. "It's a dream. And dreams may be wonderful, but at some point you have to wake up from them. You can't spend your whole life in peaceful oblivion." But Daphne won't hear it, so Diana agrees to let her go. She agrees because Daphne doesn't give her a choice. "You don't get to decide for me," Daphne says. She leaves 2 weeks after her departure for the pack house and goes to the tree to wait for Gray as planned. This time, she knows what she wants to tell him, that she loves him, that she doesn't need to see him to love him, and that she never wants to leave him ever again. She sits by her tree and waits, holding on to her words, her courage, and her love. But Gray never shows. Daphne waits for what feels like an eternity. At some point, she thinks of going back to the pack house for fresh water and food, but in the end, she doesn't move. What good would food and water do anyway? The needs she has for them are nothing compared to the need she has to see Gray again. Why hasn't he shown up yet? Did something happen? Has someone found the way to his castle? Hurt him? The very idea sends a fresh wave of fear crashing over her. She cannot bear the thought of him in pain, of him suffering alone because of her. It is her fault, all her fault, that he is lost to her now. If only she hadn't left, if only she hadn't dragged Hunter to the castle, this nightmare would never have begun. She has to do something. She has to go back to him. She begins to search the woods, certain that she can pick up enough traces of Hunter's scent, of her own scent from when they had been led to the castle, that she can find it again. The hours stretch on, blending into an endless blur as Daphne looks around with increasing desperation. The world around her is unyielding, a harsh and unforgiving landscape that seems to mock her with its indifference. The trees, once so familiar and comforting, now loom over her, their branches clawing at the sky, at her, as if trying to drag her back into a reality she no longer wants to face. The sun rises and sets, but the castle is nowhere to be seen. It's no use, Daphne thinks, sinking to her knees. The castle is impossible to find without Gray leading the way. There is no home without him. A sob tears from her throat, raw and broken. How can she live in this world when she has known the gentleness of Gray's touch, the dreamlike serenity of the castle, the brightness of the sun, the roughness of the earth, the sharpness of every sound, all conspire against her, reminding her that she no longer belongs here. Daphne clutches at the earth beneath her, her fingers digging into the dirt. Gray's castle is where she belongs. The life they had built together there is the only life she wants. The rest of the world outside is nothing but pain and sorrow, an endless stretch of barren land where hope withers and dies. She needs to find a way back to it, needs to be with the man she loves. But how? How when their home has been magically enchanted to never be found? Daphne blinks. Magically enchanted? That's it. She knows what she needs to do. There once was a young man, Gray had said. Daphne remembers now, upon the early days of her depressive spiral, a young man who, to his entire family's dismay, was the heir to lands and a small fortune. He was of sickly disposition and rarely left his room, for when he did, he wouldn't go very far without his wheelchair. No one trusted someone so fragile to make the fortune prosper. This young man hadn't known his father, but had been raised by a mother so cold and distant she may as well have been a stranger. So the only person this young man had ever loved was his younger sibling, a brother who was everything he wasn't, healthy, charming, vibrant, but who loved him deeply nonetheless. It was this brother who introduced the young man to Anna, a lady of noble birth whose father had squandered the family fortune on bad investments and drink. Anna never seemed to care about her misfortune. She was a free spirit who brought life and light wherever she went. It came as no surprise when she began warming the sickly young man's heart. She never treated him like a fragile invalid and made him happier than he'd ever been. About a year after meeting her, he asked her to be his wife. Their engagement party was a grand affair, the sort of gathering that brought together the city's most distinguished aristocrats. Amidst the soft flicker of candlelight and the vibrant colors of the women's gowns, Anna was the center of attention, her beauty outshining even the opulence of the surroundings. The young man knew he would not be able to take her to the dance floor, so his younger brother, ever the dutiful sibling, stepped in. Then the sickly young man watched as they moved to the center of the floor, the music swelling around them. Anna laughed, her eyes sparkling with joy, and his brother, oh, how he looked at her. The whispers began then, hushed voices passing from one guest to another, the gossip spreading like wildfire. Yet the young man refused to listen, refused to see what was right in front of him. He told himself it was simply the joy of the occasion. Evening brought the excitement of the dance, making Anna's cheeks flush. Her brother simply stepped in where he couldn't, playing the charming social figure he never could be and fulfilling obligations that weren't his own. But deep down, a part of him grew afraid. His brother had taken Anna everywhere he himself couldn't go. Doubting his best friend didn't sit well with him, yet doubt now laced his heart. When the guests were long gone and sleep eluded him, the young man decided to visit his brother's quarters. He found them in bed together, Anna discussing their future. After your brother and I are married and he succumbs to his long, painful illness, we can have balls like this every night, she squealed, kissing his brother's cheek as she never had his. Just picture it, how grand it will be when you finally claim your family's fortune as your own, when our love can be out in the open. It might take a while for my brother to succumb, his brother replied, sounding heartbroken at the mere thought of such a fate. It broke the sickly young man's heart further. It doesn't have to take long, Anna laughed, trailing her fingers down his chest. In fact, I'm sure we could find a way for his condition to worsen sooner than expected. The young man didn't wait to hear more. Knowing the woman he loved wanted him gone was unbearable enough. Hearing his beloved brother entertain those same thoughts shattered him completely. In that moment, he wished never to hear another sound again. Gray ended his story there, leaving Daphne uncertain whether it was true or false. She couldn't recall what she'd said or how Gray responded. Now she berates herself for not thinking harder about it then. 2 weeks after encountering Hunter, Daphne walks into Adrian's store. She hadn't seen her since the night they met and talked at Gray's castle, so relief washes over her upon finding Adrian standing there, despite being soaked from the rain and dripping onto the carpet. Adrian had intended to stop Hunter when granting his wish. He explained his plan to ensure no harm would come to Gray. Still, Daphne worried something might have gone awry. Adrian reassured her after Hunter left the shop. The weapon he wished for only works if it comes into contact with Gray's face. Once Hunter sees him, the curse will take hold, and he won't be able to bring himself to kill Gray. Daphne thought Adrian's solution clever, even though he'd had no choice but to grant Hunter's wish. If a client insisted on proceeding despite knowing the cost, Adrian was bound by duty to comply. Yet Daphne knew that if anything happened to Gray, or to her, despite Adrian's efforts to prevent it, he'd blame himself, dangerously so. This is why I had initially been pleased to welcome Daphne into the store, though the feeling hadn't lasted long. The devastated look on her face stopped me cold. "What happened?" I asked. "Did Hunter harm Gray?" She shook her head, glancing around the shop nervously. I didn't think she realized she was ruining our floor with rainwater. "Is Adrian here?" she asked. The forlorn, almost crazed look in her eyes worried me, and I quickly found Adrian in the back, thankfully awake. He paled upon hearing the news, his already light complexion turning sickly. "She must have seen his face," he muttered, more to himself than to me, as he hurried to find Daphne. My heart sank as I followed after him. After our meeting with Gray and Daphne a few weeks prior at the castle, I'd been confused about the whole seeing Gray's face makes you fall in love with him thing. After all, I'd seen him, and while I'd found him very good-looking, I hadn't felt any pressing need to declare my undying love for him. To be honest, I hadn't thought much about him at all, so I'd concluded that Adrian had been exaggerating, and the curse probably wasn't a big deal. Then, when he'd granted Hunter's wish, confident that the Alpha wouldn't go through with his killing plan upon seeing Gray's face, I'd concluded that the curse was real, but that Adrian must have somehow protected me from it with his magic. He hadn't said anything about it, and neither had I, since I didn't want to remind him of how I'd followed him to the castle against his wishes. Nevertheless, this was what I thought, that I'd been protected from the curse somehow. But seeing Adrian so concerned at the prospect of Daphne having seen Gray, something told me I was mistaken. If he was confident he could protect someone from the curse, he wouldn't look so horrified about Daphne. Did this mean I was cursed? What if it just hadn't fully hit me yet? Or maybe I was already terribly in love with Gray. How does one feel when they're in love? Meanwhile, Daphne was explaining what happened to Adrian, or trying to, through her tears. I can't find my way back to the castle, and I don't know how to contact him, she cried out. That's why I have to make a wish. From an outsider's perspective, Adrian probably didn't look very concerned, but I could tell he was agitated from the purse of his mouth. Listen to me, he said. If you've seen Gray's face, then I strongly advise you to wish that you— I haven't seen his face, Daphne blinked in confusion. Why would you assume I have? Adrian gave me a pointed look, which meant he wanted me to take over. I glared at him in protest. He glared back. Well, I sighed, you seem quite upset about not being able to go back to Gray, so we assumed. Of course I'm upset, Daphne interrupted, looking fed up. I just told you I can't go back to the man I love. So you have seen him then, Adrian interrupted. Daphne blinked, incredulous. You know, you don't need to be under a curse to develop feelings for someone, right? She countered, crossing her arms. Adrian gives her a pained smile. So, what is your wish? He asks. I want to be able to find Gray, Daphne replies. You understand that if I were to grant you this wish, I would take what matters to you most, Adrian insists, making Daphne nod. I do. It usually isn't what you expect, and there's a good chance I'll come to regret it, she says, resolve hardening in her voice. I warned you, Adrian says, his shoulder sagging in defeat. Most people do. The girl looks at him, her expression unwavering. I understand, but I can't live like this anymore. I have to find him. Adrian exhales deeply. All right then. Moments later, Daphne soars above the treetops, the wind rushing past her. Her heart pounds with a mixture of fear and desperation as she scans the horizon, searching for the one thing she both longs to see and dreads with every fiber of her being. And then, in the distance, she spots it. Gray's castle. It rises from the forest like a beacon, its once magnificent spires and towers now tinged with an eerie, unsettling glow. The sight of it, the place she has come to know as home, fills her with a deep, aching pain, for she knows this will be the last time she sees it. The magician's words echo in her mind, a constant refrain of doom. I gave you the power to locate Gray at any time, though for granting you this wish, I'll be taking back the castle you love so much. Daphne had felt her heart drop when those words left his lips. She'd taken a look outside and squinted her eyes, and that's when a strange ray of light appeared in her field of vision, pointing east toward the horizon where she knew the forest to be. But Gray is still in the castle, Daphne had protested. What's going to happen to him? The magician had essentially pushed her out of the store at that point. I'll try to maintain the castle's existence for as long as I can, he'd said, a bead of sweat purling against his temples. But you need to find Gray and get him out now. Otherwise, he'll disappear along with his home to some place no one will ever be able to reach him again. Heart wild with fear, Daphne had immediately shifted and flown out the window, Adrian's words still ringing in her ears, to a place no one would ever be able to find him. What had she done? She'd been warned, but she hadn't listened. Daphne had thought she'd be the one to pay the price for her wish, and now Gray was the one facing the consequences of her actions. She'd been a poor, selfish fool, and she would never forgive herself. If Daphne's life belonged to anyone, it belonged to Gray and the dream they shared. The thought of having caused him pain was unbearable. She had taken his home and put him in danger, and Gray didn't even know. The thought is unbearable, and Daphne pushes herself to fly faster, cutting through the air like a bullet. Adrian had promised to try and maintain the castle in place for as long as he could, but he had also warned her that he wouldn't be able to hold it for long. The castle's end is imminent, and with it, the end of everything Daphne holds dear unless she reaches Gray in time. Everything Daphne holds dear vanishes as she lands with a thud in one of the open corridors, her feet hitting the stone floor hard. The sight that greets her is apocalyptic. It's as if the very fabric of the castle is disintegrating, walls and columns crumbling into tiny particles of color that float upward, shimmering briefly before turning black and disappearing into the sky. Daphne shifts back into her human form. The grand corridors, once bathed in perpetual golden light, are now shadowed and broken, parts of the floor missing entirely, exposing the dark abyss below. Her breath catches in her throat as she takes it all in, her heart breaking with each passing second. This place, once so safe, warm, and alive, is now a crumbling ruin, a ghost of its former self, all because of her. "Gray," she calls out, conjuring a ray of light at will. But all that answers her is the sound of the castle crumbling around her. She needs to find him. If she can't get them both out before the castle disappears completely, they'll both be gone. Pushing forward, the stone floor beneath her feet crumbles slightly with every step, as if it could collapse at any moment. It hurts to see this place, once so beautiful, disintegrating into darkness. But at the end of this ray of light, she hopes to find Gray, and perhaps that's all that truly matters, that they be together, if he can forgive her. Daphne stumbles through the disintegrating corridors, making her way to the room of mirrors. The door leading to it barely hangs on its hinges. The sight that greets her surpasses anything she could have imagined. An endless expanse of darkness with only the shattered remnants of mirrors floating in the air. Each fragment reflects scenes impossible to comprehend. The pieces of glass hover, spinning slowly, their jagged edges casting strange, distorted reflections that flicker and shift like fragments of a broken dream. Some show flashes of unfamiliar faces twisted in sorrow or anger. Others depict places Daphne has never seen, forests of flame, oceans churning under stormy skies, cities crumbling to dust. But then, in one larger shard, she sees something that shatters her soul. A young man sitting in a wheelchair, perched dangerously close to the edge of a cliff. Wind whips through his dark hair, and his hands grip the arms of the chair so tightly his knuckles are white. Daphne's heart clenches in her chest, and before she can stop herself, she lets out a scream, a raw, anguished sound that echoes through the room like shattering glass. As if responding to her cry, the mirror splinters further, the image fracturing into 1,000 tiny shards that scatter through the darkness, each reflecting a different piece of that haunted expression. And then, behind the broken mirror, she sees him. He stands there, bathed in soft light. The flickering light of the disintegrating mirrors casts an eerie glow, illuminating his pale skin that seems almost luminescent in the darkness. His dark hair falls in soft waves around his face, framing features so perfect they appear unreal. His eyes, an otherworldly shade of silver, catch Daphne's gaze before she gasps and instinctively covers her face with her hands. She stomps toward him, grabbing his wrists. "It's too late. I already saw you," she says firmly. "Besides, Adrian said it would be fine." "What do you mean it will be fine?" Gray protests. "It will be fine because I already love you," Daphne explains, searching his gaze intently. When Adrian had warned her about the risks of retrieving Gray without glimpsing his face, Daphne had dismissed it entirely. It didn't matter to her if she ended up delirious and consumed by love like Hunter. All that mattered was seeing Gray safe. "If your love for him is true, you'll be spared from the curse," Adrian had explained. Only someone truly in love could look at Gray and resist falling prey to his power. Gray looks at her, surprise mingled with sorrow softening his expression. For a moment, the world seems to pause, the chaos around them fading into the background as their eyes lock. "We need to go," Daphne says urgently, grabbing his hand. "The castle is going to disappear." "All my fault?" Gray asks, confusion etched on his face. "I made a wish to Adrian, to find you again," Daphne confesses, shame heavy in her voice, now that she sees his startled expression. "The price for it was the castle." "You made a wish just to find me?" he asks, disbelief coloring his tone. "Of course I did," Daphne replies, lightly hitting his arm. "You didn't come back for me. I thought I'd never see you again." But even as the words leave her lips, the room continues to crumble around them. The mirrors shatter into smaller fragments, the encroaching darkness swallowing everything whole. Deep down, Daphne knows the dream they've been living is unraveling, the life they built slipping through their fingers like sand. "Please, let's just get out of here," she pleads, clutching his cool hand. "We can find a new dream." "I can't," Gray murmurs, shaking his head. "My curse, I think I found a solution for it." Daphne's eyes widen. "Diana entrusted me with a secret meant only for alpha shifters. If you drink enough of my blood, you'll lose your vampiric powers and become mortal. Without your powers, there's no curse." She tugs at his hand, desperate to pull him along. Time is running out, the room collapsing faster than either of them can comprehend. Can they even escape this place anymore? Perhaps it's already too late. "Please come with me," Daphne begs. "We can still be happy." But Gray doesn't move. Instead, he meets her gaze, sadness pooling in his silver eyes. "Happy? In a world full of liars? Full of people who always end up disappointing you?" he asks slowly, struggling to find the right words. "I don't know. I don't know if I can." Tears spill over as he shakes his head. "Sometimes it's better to be alone." Tears spill onto Daphne's cheeks not only because she fears she is too late, but because she understands what he is saying. Hadn't she felt the same when she'd been back at the pack house with her own people, that she didn't fit there anymore? Despite it all, she throws her arms around Gray's shoulders, burying her face in his chest. "You're not alone," she tells him. "You have me now." Outside the bookstore, the sun is disappearing beyond the horizon, but we've yet to hear back from Daphne ever since she left to find Gray earlier. Adrian says the castle is fully gone now, and he's been bedridden ever since its disappearance. He'd spared too much of his magic trying to keep it standing long enough for Daphne and Gray to escape. Adrian isn't supposed to spend his magic on personal use. It has only been given to him so he may grant other people their wishes. When he does use it for his own benefit, it hurts him, and I suspect he doesn't let on how much. I don't know. Gray could have left the place at any time, but he never chose to. I don't think he even knows how to live outside that castle anymore. His eyes are half closed, and he says this in the bored tone one would use to comment on the weather, but he can't fool me. "It isn't your fault, you know," I say. "Gray chose to make his wish. He chose to stay in that castle." Adrian keeps quiet. Outside, night has fully set by now, and I can't help but imagine Gray and Daphne, confused and alone in the forest where the castle used to stand, wondering what to do next. I think I'll go make all of us some dinner, I tell Adrian. They'll be hungry and they'll have nowhere to go. Iris, he sighs, massaging his temples, don't get your hopes up. Look, I say, I get that life is hard. I'm sure Gray. But Adrian is already rolling his eyes at me. You're ridiculously optimistic, he snaps, probably because you're so young. All I'm saying is that it all gets easier with someone by your side, I conclude, annoyed. Adrian snaps one of his eyes open, making him look like a scowling cat. The image makes me smile. Well, he shrugs, prepare yourself a blindfold then. If they do come back, Gray will still be a vampire for a while. It would be a shame for you to get cursed now, wouldn't it? I open my mouth in hesitation. Should I tell him I've already seen Gray? I take in his sagging shoulders, the grim line of his mouth. Adrian doesn't look like he believes he or Daphne will ever be coming back. It doesn't look like he believes in anything anymore, really. So I exit his bedroom in silence.